Jonah Rourke woke to the taste of copper and the sensation of being cooked alive. He was face down in sand that felt less like grit and more like pulverized charcoal. It filled his mouth, coating his tongue with a dry, metallic bitterness that made him gag before he even opened his eyes. When he finally forced his eyelids apart, the world was a blur of violent violet and bruised black. The sky was wrong. It was a churning, heaving ceiling of purple storm clouds that hung oppressively low, swollen with something that looked heavier than water. Rain was falling, but it did not splash. It struck. Each drop hit his exposed neck like a micro-needle, stinging sharply enough to make his nerves jump. He tried to push himself up, but his arms felt like they were made of lead. Gravity here was heavier, not by much, maybe 10 or 15%, but enough to make his heart labor against his ribs like a trapped bird. A sound tore through the thick atmosphere, a high-pitched, oscillating shriek that vibrated in his teeth. Jonah rolled onto his back, gasping as the movement sent a fresh wave of agony through his left side. Above him, slicing through the violet gloom, was a ship. It was sleek, teardrop-shaped, and darker than the storm clouds, its hull absorbing the faint ambient light rather than reflecting it. It hovered there for 3 seconds, just long enough for Jonah to lock eyes with the sensor array on its underbelly. Just long enough for them to verify he was conscious. No rescue ladder descended. No speaker crackled with an explanation. With a sound like tearing canvas, the ship accelerated upward, vanishing into the ionosphere in a single, impossible heartbeat. It left behind nothing but a scorched circle of glassed sand and the crushing, absolute silence of abandonment. Jonah stared at the empty sky. The realization hit him harder than the gravity. He had not crashed. He had not been lost during a hyperspace transit. He had been delivered. He sat up, fighting the nausea that rolled in his gut. The landscape around him was a nightmare of geology. Jagged spires of obsidian rock stabbed upward from the dune sea, looking like the ribcage of some subterranean leviathan. The vegetation, what little there was of it, was stark white and leafless, consisting of thorny scrub brush that seemed to bleed a black sap when the wind whipped it. 100 yards to his left, half buried in a drift of ash, lay the wreckage of a survival pod. Jonah stumbled toward it, his boots sinking into the soft, hot surface. His left side was wet. He looked down and saw a jagged tear in his flight suit, the fabric dark with blood. A piece of shrapnel from the ejection must have caught him. He pressed his hand over it, his jaw tightening, and kept moving. The pod was a husk. The impact had shattered the main seal and the interior was stripped bare. The distress beacon sat in the center of the console, its indicator light dead and gray. But it was the writing on the side of the hull that froze the blood in his veins. Stamped into the metal in bold red paint, repeated in galactic standard, Keth and High Terran was a warning. Quarantine zone, no extraction. Jonah ran his thumb over the letters. The paint was old, peeling under the harsh radiation of this place. This wasn't a mistake. This was a garbage disposal. He checked the pod's manifest. Empty. The rations were gone, likely looted by local fauna or scattered in the descent. The water filtration unit was smashed. All that remained was a small emergency battery pack that still held a charge and a survival knife wedged under the seat. He took them. The first hour was a brutal education in the physics of Varos. The sun, a bloated red giant that peered angrily through the haze, began to set, and the temperature dropped with terrifying speed. The heat of the day evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold that felt like the vacuum of deep space. Jonah needed water. His throat was parchment, and the stinging rain had stopped, replaced by a thick, rolling fog that smelled of sulfur. He found a cluster of the white thorny bushes and used the survival knife to hack away a clearing at their base. He dug a shallow pit in the ash, lined it with a piece of plastic shielding ripped from the pod seat, and set a cold stone in the center. Then he stretched another piece of plastic over the hole, weighing down the edges with rocks. It was a basic solar still, improvised for a fog trap. Condensation would gather on the plastic and drip into the liner. It would taste foul, but it would keep him alive. The cold was biting now, seeping through his flight suit. He huddled in the lee of the pod wreckage, shivering violently. His wound was throbbing, a dull, hot pulse that warned of infection. He peeled back the fabric. The gash was 3 inches long, deep enough to show the layer of fat beneath the skin. But it had stopped bleeding. The problem was the color. The edges were turning a sickly gray. He looked at the battery pack in his hand. It was a heavy industrial cell with exposed terminals. Jonah closed his eyes and took a breath. He grabbed a piece of wire from the pod wreckage, twisting it around the positive and negative terminals until the metal glowed a furious orange-white. He bit down on the leather collar of his flight suit. He shoved the glowing wire into the wound. The sound of his own scream was lost in the howling wind, but the smell of burning meat filled the small space behind the wreckage. Jonah blacked out for a second, or maybe a minute. When he came back, he was lying in the ash, panting, sweat freezing on his forehead. The wound was sealed. It was ugly, a charred mess of scar tissue, but the gray rot was burned away. He passed the night drifting in and out of consciousness, listening to the wind scream over the razor rocks. Morning brought no warmth, only a shift in the light from black to bruised purple. Jonah checked his water trap. He had managed to collect perhaps half a cup of liquid. It was cloudy and smelled faintly of rotten eggs. But he drank it. It burned going down. He needed to move. Staying near the pod was a death sentence. If there were predators, they would investigate the crash site. He began to walk, heading toward a ridge of high rock that offered better cover than the open dunes. The gravity dragged at his ankles. Every step required a conscious decision. By midday, he found the first proof that Varos was not just a desolate rock, but a hunting ground. He was navigating a narrow canyon, the walls rising high on either side, blocking out the red sun. The silence here was heavy, unnatural. The wind didn't reach down this far. Jonah stopped. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. It was a primal instinct, something buried deep in the human genome from the days when men were prey on the African savanna. He turned slowly. They were flowing down the canyon walls like oil. There were 6 of them. They looked like lizards stripped of their skin, their bodies a sleek, muscular nightmare of matte black scales that seemed to absorb the light. They were the size of wolves, low to the ground, with heads that were mostly jaw. They made no sound, no growls, no clicking claws. They moved with a terrifying, coordinated intelligence. 2 flanked him on the left, 2 on the right. The largest one, the Alpha, dropped directly onto the path in front of him, blocking his exit. The 6th circled behind. Jonah drew the survival knife. It felt laughably small in his hand. The Alpha opened its mouth. It didn't have teeth in the traditional sense. It had serrated ridges of bone that scissored together. It hissed, a sound like steam escaping a vent. Jonah tightened his grip. He wasn't going to outrun them. He wasn't going to overpower them. But he would make sure the first one that touched him choked on the blade. Come on, he thought, the adrenaline turning the world sharp and bright. Let's finish it. The Alpha tensed its hind legs to spring. A crack echoed through the canyon, sharp, dry, and singular. The Alpha's head exploded. Violet blood misted the air as the creature collapsed mid-leap, its momentum carrying its twitching body to Jonah's feet. The other 5 froze. They looked at their fallen leader. Then up at the canyon rim. Another crack. The lizard on the far left spun in a circle. A hole punched clean through its spine and dropped. The remaining 4 didn't hesitate. They didn't panic or scatter randomly. They turned in unison and vanished back up the walls, melting into the shadows with impossible speed. Jonah stood alone in the canyon, his chest heaving, the knife still raised. He looked up at the ridge, searching for the shooter. The angle was steep. Whoever it was had to be 300 yards up, shooting through swirling dust and variable gravity. He waited. Nothing moved. "Show yourself," Jonah shouted, his voice cracking. The wind swallowed his words. There was no answer. The unseen presence had saved him, but it refused to acknowledge him. He didn't sheath the knife. He walked out of the canyon with his shoulders hunched, feeling the weight of a crosshair between his shoulder blades for the next 2 miles. Night fell again, bringing the crippling cold. Jonah found a shallow depression under an overhang of rock and huddled into a ball. He was exhausted, his body running on fumes. He heard the footsteps before he saw her. They were deliberate. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Jonah scrambled up, putting his back to the rock wall, the knife out. A figure emerged from the gloom. She was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with a build that was slender but corded with muscle. She wore a suit that looked like it had been scavenged from a dozen different sources, but the base layer was unmistakable, a high-grade envoy suit, the kind diplomats wore to first contact ceremonies. It was cracked and scuffed, coated in the dust of the planet, but the material shimmered with a faint residual energy field. She stopped 10 feet away. She raised her hands, palms open. Her skin was a pale alabaster violet, and her hair was a stark white braid that fell over her shoulder. But it was her eyes that held him. They were large, completely pupilless, and luminous, glowing with a soft internal gold light. Jonah didn't lower the knife. "Who are you?" She tilted her head. Her voice was smooth, melodic, and terrifyingly calm. "I am Seren. You are injured. I asked who you are, not what I am," Jonah snapped. She took a step forward, and Jonah flinched. She stopped immediately. "I am stranded here, just as you are," she said. Her galactic standard was perfect, too perfect. It lacked the guttural slang of the Outer Rim or the clipped efficiency of the military. It was the diction of the academy. "Bullshit," Jonah said. Seren blinked. "I beg your pardon? You're not a prisoner." Jonah gestured with the knife at her chest. "That suit has a kinetic dampener weave. I can see the shimmer. And that rifle on your back? That's a Spectre-class railgun, and prisoners don't get hardware like that." Seren's expression didn't change, but her posture shifted. The open palms lowered slightly. The air of harmless benevolence evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating assessment. She looked at him not as a person, but as a variable in an equation. "You are observant," she said. "I'm alive," Jonah corrected. "Those usually go together. I saved your life in the canyon," she stated. "Why?" "Because you are interesting." Jonah laughed, a harsh barking sound. "I'm a lab rat." "That's what you mean." Serene watched him. The luminous gold of her eyes seemed to swirl. "You need medical attention. That cauterization on your flank is crude. It will go septic within 20 hours. She reached into a pouch at her belt and pulled out a small silver canister. She tossed it to him. Jonah caught it. It was a pressurized medical sealant, the kind that cost a month's wages in the core systems. "Why help me?" Jonah asked, weighing the canister. "Because survival is statistically improbable alone," Seren said. "And because I require data." Jonah stared at her. She was lying. Or at least, she was omitting 90% of the truth. but the pain in his side was a screaming constant, and the cold was seeping into his bones. He popped the seal on the canister and sprayed the foam over his burn. The relief was instant and orgasmic. The pain vanished, replaced by a cool numbness. "Thanks," he grunted, looking her in the eye. Seren flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening of her jaw, a slight recoil of her head. It looked like he had slapped her. "What?" Jonah asked. "You thanked me," she said, her voice sounding genuinely confused. "Yeah, you gave me medicine. That's how it works." She stared at him for a long moment, the golden light in her eyes dimming slightly. "You are a strange anomaly." Jonah Rourke. She knew his name. Of course she knew his name. They walked together through the night. It was an uneasy alliance. Jonah walked 2 paces behind her and to the left, watching her hands. She moved with a grace that was unnatural, stepping over obstacles without looking down. The landscape began to open up, in the distance, far across the salt flats. Jonah saw flickering lights. They were weak and scattered like dying fireflies. "What is that?" he asked. "Other exiles," Seren said. "There are more?" "Thousands," she answered. "The coalition has been dumping dissidents, political rivals, and unwanted witnesses here for 50 cycles." Jonah watched the lights. He saw a rhythm in them. Long flash, short flash, long flash. "They're signaling," he said. "That's old Navy code. Smoke signals during the day, lights at night. They're trying to organize. They are trying to survive," Seren corrected. "There is no organization, only desperation." He heard a sound on the wind, a faint, rhythmic thrumming. He stopped and listened. It was a radio broadcast, looping on an open frequency. It sounded like music, or maybe a prayer, distorted by the static of the storm. "Ghosts," Jonah muttered. "Echoes," Seren said. "The atmosphere here traps radio waves. You are hearing transmissions from years ago." She stopped and tapped a device on her wrist. It was a subtle movement, masked by her adjusting her glove. But Jonah caught it. A small red light blinked on her gauntlet. "Who are you talking to?" Jonah asked. "No one," she said quickly. "I am simply checking the atmospheric pressure." "You're recording," Jonah said. "Reporting in?" "Subject is currently walking and talking. Please advise." Seren turned to him. Her face was hard. "You are paranoid, and you're a spy." The tension snapped between them, sharp and electric. They stood in the dark, the wind howling around them. Seren looked like she wanted to shoot him. Jonah looked like he was waiting for her to try. Then, she sighed. It was a very human sound. "You are adapting faster than predicted," she admitted softly. "Good," Jonah said. "Keep predicting. I like disappointing people." They pushed on. The terrain grew rockier, littered with debris that didn't look geological. Twisted girders of metal jutted from the ground. Slabs of concrete the size of houses lay shattered in the dust. And then, they found the monolith. It stood in the center of a crater, a slab of black stone 3 stories tall. It wasn't natural. The surface was perfectly smooth, unmarred by the sandstorms. As they approached, deep blue lines of light began to trace geometric patterns across its face. Jonah stepped closer. "Do not touch it," Seren warned. Jonah ignored her. He reached out and pressed his palm against the cold stone. The monolith hummed. A pulse of blue light swept over him, scanning him from head to toe. It felt like walking through a static field. The glyphs on the stone shifted, rearranging themselves, churning until they formed jagged, blocky letters in a trade pigeon that Jonah could barely read. Build or be erased. Jonah stared at the words. "What is this?" he whispered. "Ancient," Serene said, her voice hushed. "Pre-coalition, pre-everything. This planet was not always a wasteland. It was a test site. A test for what? Civilization," she said. Jonah pulled his hand back. The light faded. "We need shelter," he said abruptly. "The storm is getting worse." They found a cave a mile further on. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for one person, but it opened into a cavern that was shockingly smooth. The walls were not rock. They were lined with a metallic glass that reflected their body heat. It was warm inside, dry. Serene sat against the far wall, unhooking her railgun. Jonah slumped opposite her. He stripped off his flight jacket. The back of his undershirt was stuck to his skin with dried blood from the micro-needle rain. He hissed as he tried to peel it off. "Let me," Serene said. She moved across the cave. Her hands were cool. She peeled the fabric away with surprising gentleness, then applied a fresh layer of the sealant. Her fingers lingered on his shoulder blade. She wasn't just treating the wound. She was tracing the muscle, the scar tissue from old fights. Jonah felt a jolt of electricity go through him. It wasn't pain. It was awareness. He could smell her, ozone and something like cinnamon. He pulled away on instinct, jerking his shoulder forward. Serene snatched her hand back. She looked at her own fingers, her eyes wide, as if they had betrayed her. She looked offended. "Sorry," Jonah muttered. Reflex. Serene didn't answer. She moved back to her side of the cave, putting distance between them. "This planet," she said quietly, looking at the cave floor. "It changes people. The radiation, the stress. It alters neurochemistry." "Is that an excuse?" Jonah asked. "It is a warning." "A warning about what?" "About attachment," she said. "Nothing lasts here. Jonah." Jonah leaned his head back against the glass wall. Outside, the wind had died down, replaced by a heavy rhythmic thudding. Boom, boom, boom. Something enormous was walking past the cave entrance. The ground vibrated. A shadow blocked out the faint light of the stars, massive and shifting. It breathed, a wet, rattling sound that shook dust from the ceiling. They sat in silence until the creature passed. Jonah felt a cold fury rising in his chest. It started in his gut and worked its way up, burning like the acid rain. He thought about the ship hovering over him, the stamped warning on the pod, the game they were playing with his life, the sheer arrogance of it. He looked at Serene. She was watching the entrance, her profile illuminated by the faint blue glow of her suit indicators. "Aliens dropped him on a Deathworld," Jonah said aloud. Serene turned to look at him. "He built a civilization instead," Jonah finished. The words felt heavy in his mouth. Serene stared at him. "Is that a prophecy?" she asked. "It's a headline," Jonah said. "Or maybe an obituary. Is that what you want from me? Is that the test? You drop us in the meat grinder and see if we make sausage or if we get eaten." Serene didn't answer. She looked down at her hands, the ones that had lingered on his skin. She could have lied. She could have given him some coalition propaganda about rehabilitation or quarantine protocols. But she stayed silent. And in that silence, Jonah heard the truth. She was part of it. She was the observer. But she was sitting in a cave with a prisoner, hiding from a monster. And she hadn't killed him yet. Her silence was a betrayal of her orders. And it was the first sign that maybe, just maybe, she was capable of choosing him anyway. "Get some sleep, spy," Jonah said, closing his eyes. "We have a lot of building to do tomorrow." The journey to the lights was a pilgrimage through a graveyard of giants. Jonah and Serene walked for 2 days. moving only when the red sun was low enough to spare them the worst of the radiation. The terrain between the crash site and the distant signals was not merely barren, it was hostile architecture. They crossed fields of bone, vast and white, where the rib cages of dead megafauna curved out of the ash like the arches of a cathedral. The bones were old, polished to a dull sheen by the wind, and big enough that Jonah could walk upright through a spinal column without ducking. But the bone fields were quiet. The singing rocks were not. They hit the zone of sonic resonance on the second night. It was a valley filled with hollow, fluted pillars of obsidian that caught the relentless wind and turned it into a low-frequency hum. The sound wasn't heard so much as felt. It vibrated in the marrow of Jonah's femurs. It made his teeth ache. Serene stumbled. Jonah caught her arm, steadying her. Her skin felt fever-hot through the envoy suit. "My HUD is ghosting," she said, her voice tight. "The harmonics. They are scrambling my sensory input." "Turn it off," Jonah said. "I cannot," she replied. "It is integrated." She wasn't just wearing the suit. She was wired into it. Jonah saw the gold luminosity of her eyes flickering, the pupils widening and contracting in a chaotic rhythm. The sonic jamming was overloading her neural interface. "Grab my shoulder," Jonah ordered. "Close your eyes. I'll walk for both of us." She hesitated, her pride warring with the fact that she was effectively blind. Then, she reached out and gripped the fabric of his flight suit. Her grip was iron hard. They moved through the singing valley like that, a blind alien guided by a battered human. The noise rose to a scream that made Jonah's nose bleed, a constant drilling pressure that tried to unseat his balance. When they finally emerged on the other side, the silence that followed was so profound it made Jonah dizzy. Serene released him and leaned against a rock, retching dryly. Her eyes slowly stabilized, the gold glow settling back into a steady hum. "You didn't leave me," she said. She sounded surprised. Jonah wiped the blood from his upper lip. "I considered it. But you have the map." He was lying, and she knew it. The map was in his head now, too. They crested the final ridge an hour before dawn. Below them, nestled in the crater of an extinct volcano, was the source of the lights. It was a shanty town built from the refuse of the galaxy. Structures were cobbled together from starship plating, heat shield tiling, and the tanned hides of local predators. A perimeter fence made of razor wire and sharpened bone encircled the camp. In the center, a sputtering fusion generator coughed blue smoke into the air, powering a ring of floodlights that kept the shadows at bay. It wasn't a settlement. It was a holding pen. "Let's go introduce ourselves," Jonah said. They descended the slope, sliding in the loose shale. As they approached the main gate, a heavy slab of hull metal on rusted hydraulic hinges, three figures emerged from the gloom to meet them. The one in the center was a Keith. The reptilian biped stood 7 feet tall, his scales the color of dried blood, a heavy pulse rifle slung across his chest. Flanking him were two humans, gaunt and ragged, holding improvised spears tipped with glass. "Halt," the Keth hissed. The sound came from deep in his throat, a wet, rattling vibration. Jonah stopped, holding his hands out from his sides, just passing through. "Neighbor." The Keth sniffed the air, his slit pupils narrowing. Fresh meat and perfume. He looked at Seren. She stood tall, her envoy suit cleaning the dust from itself with static pulses. She looked like a diamond in a sewer. "Nice gear," one of the humans muttered, shifting his grip on the spear. Prison rules, Jonah thought. Weakness is death. Hesitation is death. "We're looking for water," Jonah said, keeping his voice bored. "And we're willing to trade labor for it." The Keth laughed. It was an ugly sound, We have labor. We have water. We do not have you. He raised the rifle. Jonah didn't flinch. He didn't look at the gun. He looked at the Keth's boots. They were falling apart, wrapped in wire to keep the soles attached. You have a busted condenser, Jonah said. The Keth froze. What? I can hear it from here, Jonah said, gesturing with his chin toward the camp. That generator is misfiring on the third cycle. That means your intake valves are clogged with ash. You're getting half power and maybe 30% water purity, am I right? The Keth lowered the rifle an inch. I'm an engineer. Jonah lied. He was a mechanic. But out here, the difference was academic. I can fix it. Or you can shoot us, eat us, and then die of thirst in a week when that intake finally seizes up. Your call. The silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. The Keth looked at Jonah, then at Seren, then back at the sputtering generator behind the gate. Open it, the Keth grunted. The heavy gate groaned open. Jonah stepped through, Seren on his heels. As she passed the Keth, the reptile recoiled, his nostrils flaring. Coalition, he snarled. The word went through the nearby scavengers like an electric shock. Heads turned, eyes widened. She's a spy. Someone whispered, look at the suit. That's a warden. Jonah stepped between Serene and the crowd. She's with me, he said loudly. She's a defector. It was a weak lie, but it bought them a second. The Keth glared at Seren with pure, unadulterated hate, but the promise of water outweighed the desire for revenge. For now. Fix the condenser, the Keth growled. Then we decide if you live. The camp was a nightmare of squalor. Creatures from a dozen different worlds huddled around small fires fueled by dried dung. There was a winged avian, an icarid, slumped against a crate, its feathers matted with oil, bandaging the leg of a shivering human child. The smell of unwashed bodies, ozone, and despair was a physical weight. Jonah went to work. The condenser was a piece of junk, a standard-issue colonial unit that had been stripped and reassembled by idiots. Jonah spent 4 hours elbow-deep in the machinery. Scrubbing filters with solvent he distilled from local berries and recalibrating the magnetic flow with a multi-tool he borrowed from the avian medic. Seren stood guard, her back to the machine, her hand hovering near her hidden sidearm. The camp residents watched her with a mix of hunger and terror. To them, she represented the system that had condemned them. She was the clean, beautiful face of their executioners. Why do you do it? Serene asked quietly, not turning her head. Do what? Jonah asked, wrenching a bolt tight. Help them. They would have killed you for your boots. They're thirsty. Seren, it's hard to be polite when your tongue is swelling up. Jonah wiped grease on his pants and kicked the starter motor. The condenser coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. The chaotic rattling smoothed out into a steady, rhythmic hum. Clear, cold water began to fill the collection tank. A cheer went up from the nearest watchers. It was ragged, but real. The Keth walked over, inspecting the flow. He dipped a claw in, tasted it, and grunted. Acceptable. Name's Jonah, Jonah said, extending a greasy hand. The Keth looked at the hand, then grasped the forearm in a warrior's grip. Vrax. And the lady? Vrax asked, looking at Seren. She's the one who keeps me from talking too much, Jonah said. They were given a corner of a rusted hangar to sleep in. It wasn't luxury, but it was out of the wind. That night, the camp didn't sleep. It waited. Jonah was organizing the perimeter, trying to convince a group of humans that stacking crates against the weak point in the fence was a good idea. When the alarm sounded, it wasn't a siren. It was a scream. Raiders! Vrax roared from the gate. Ferals. They came from the darkness like a wave of locusts. These weren't the organized scavengers of Vrax's camp. These were the broken ones, men and women who had snapped under the pressure of Varos, turning into cannibals and berserkers. They wore the flayed skins of lizards and painted their faces with ash. They hit the gate with a battering ram made of stone and bone. The metal buckled. Jonah grabbed a heavy iron bar from a pile of scrap. He looked at the panic spreading through the camp. People were running, hiding, trampling each other. "Stand fast!" Jonah bellowed. His voice was a command deck roar. Trained over engines, if they get in, we all die. Form a line. Vrax was at the breach, firing his pulse rifle until it clicked dry. The gate gave way with a screech of tearing metal. The ferals poured in. Jonah stepped forward. He swung the iron bar, catching the first raider in the chest. The impact jarred his arms to the shoulders, but the man went down. Then the chaos swallowed him. It was a brawl, ugly and close. Jonah fought with brutal efficiency, using the bar to break limbs and drive the attackers back. But there were too many of them. A raider with filed teeth tackled him, a knife flashing toward Jonah's throat. Jonah caught the wrist, straining against the manic strength of the feral. The knife inched closer. Then the raider's head snapped back. A single, precise impact. Seren was there. She moved like water. She didn't use a gun. She used her hands and legs in a display of martial arts that was too fast to follow. She deflected a spear thrust, broke the attacker's arm, and kicked him into the path of another raider in one fluid motion. She spun, her elbow connecting with a jaw, dropping a man twice her weight. It wasn't desperate fighting. It was choreography. It was elite military suppression tactics adapted for close quarters. She cleared a circle around Jonah in 10 seconds. Jonah scrambled up, breathless. He looked at her. She wasn't even panting. Her face was a mask of concentration, her eyes burning with that high beam gold light. "Cover the left flank," she ordered. Her voice cut through the noise. Jonah obeyed. They fought back to back for 20 minutes. Vrax rallied the Keth. The avian medic dropped rocks from above. The ferals, realizing this wasn't a slaughter but a battle, broke and ran, dragging their dead with them. Silence returned to the camp, broken only by the groans of the wounded. Jonah leaned on his iron bar, watching Seren. She was checking a fallen raider for vitals, her movements clinical. She wasn't a diplomat, she was a weapon. "Come with me," Jonah said. He led her away from the celebrating survivors, behind the hum of the condenser he had fixed. It was dark here, the shadows long and sharp. Jonah threw the iron bar down. It clattered loudly on the metal floor. "Who are you?" he demanded. "And don't give me the envoy speech." Seren straightened. She wiped a speck of blood from her cheek, not hers. "I told you," she said. "I am an observer." "Observers watch," Jonah said, stepping closer. "You fight like a specter. I've seen Marines move slower than you. You took out 6 men in 10 seconds without a weapon. That's not self-defense training. That's liquidation protocol." Seren looked away. The gold in her eyes swirled, agitated. "I was trained to survive," she said. "You were trained to kill," Jonah corrected. "You're not just here to confirm my death, are you? You're here to make sure of it if the planet doesn't do the job." "No!" The word exploded out of her. She looked at him, and for the first time, the mask slipped completely. There was fear there, and shame. "I was sent to confirm conditions," she whispered. "To assess the viability of the experiment." "Experiment?" Jonah froze. "But I am not an executioner. Jonah, I swear it." She took a step toward him. In the confined space behind the condenser, the air suddenly changed. Jonah was pumping adrenaline. His heart was hammering from the fight. He was sweating, bleeding from a cut on his brow, radiating the heat of violence. Seren stopped. Her nostrils flared, her pupils dilated until the gold was almost swallowed by black. Her skin flushed a deep, violent indigo. Her breath hitched. Jonah saw her hands tremble, and she wasn't afraid. She was reacting. "What's wrong with you?" Jonah asked, his voice dropping. "It is your biology," she stammered. She backed up until she hit the condenser housing. Her voice was strained, breathless. "My species. We are sensitive to pheromones, high cortisol, testosterone, adrenaline. In close proximity, it triggers a bonding response." She looked at him with a hunger that was terrifying and raw. It was a biological imperative, a chemical override of her logic. She wanted him, right there, in the dirt and the oil. Jonah realized what was happening. He realized he could cross the 3 feet between them and she wouldn't stop him. She couldn't stop him. The power dynamic shifted instantly. He wasn't the prisoner anymore. Jonah took a step back. He turned his head and spat blood on the ground. "Breathe." "Seren," he said roughly. Seren gripped the machinery behind her, her knuckles white. "I cannot control it. It is instinctive." "Then I'll control it for you," Jonah said. He locked eyes with her. He didn't look at her body. He looked at the person trapped inside the chemistry. "I don't take what isn't freely given," he said. "And I don't exploit a tactical advantage. You're high on combat fumes. It's not real." Seren stared at him. The flush on her skin began to recede, very slowly. The trembling in her hands stopped. The hunger in her eyes was replaced by something else, confusion. And then, a profound, crushing respect. "Most men," she whispered, "most men would not have stopped." "I'm not most men," Jonah said. "I'm the guy fixing your water." He turned and walked away, leaving her shivering in the dark. He didn't tell her how hard it had been to walk away. He didn't tell her that his own blood was singing with the same electric pull. The next morning, Jonah called a meeting. He stood on a crate in the center of the camp. Vrak stood next to him, arms crossed, lending his silent authority. Seren stood at the back, wrapped in a cloak, watching. "This isn't working," Jonah announced. The crowd murmured. "We survived the raid," someone shouted. "We got lucky," Jonah shot back. "Next time, they'll bring more men. They'll bring siege ladders, and we'll be dead." He looked around the circle of faces, scavengers, thieves, killers. "We stop acting like prisoners," Jonah said. "We start acting like a crew." He outlined the plan. "No more hoarding. Rations go into a central pool. We set up watch rotations, 3 shifts, mixed species. We build a wall, a real one, and we set up a council. Vrax represents the Keth. The bird doc, what's your name? Kale, represents the others. I'll speak for the humans." "And why should we listen to you?" a scarred human heckler yelled. "You've been here 3 days." "Because I fixed the water," Jonah said. "And because I know how to build a turret out of that scrap metal you're sitting on." Laughter rippled through the crowd. It was skeptical, but it wasn't hostile. "We have a rule," Jonah said, his voice hard. "No exploitation. You don't steal from the crew. You don't hurt the crew. You break the rule. You face the council. You break it twice. You leave the gate and you don't come back." It was naive. It was impossible. But they did it. Over the next week, the camp transformed. The fence was reinforced with welded plating. A trench was dug. The water condenser was upgraded with a secondary filter. And then, the child found him. It was the silent boy Jonah had seen with the medic. He was small, human-looking, but his eyes were strange, silver, reflecting light like a cat's. He tugged on Jonah's sleeve while Jonah was welding a strut. Jonah lifted his mask. "What's up, kid?" The boy didn't speak. He pointed toward the back of the volcanic crater, where a landslide had exposed a section of the rock wall. He pulled Jonah's hand. Jonah followed. Seren saw them leaving and fell into step behind them, her rifle at the low ready. The boy led them to a fissure in the rock. He squeezed through. Jonah and Seren followed. Inside, the cave didn't look like a cave. The back wall was smooth, seamless gray metal. And in the center of the metal was a door. It was marked with the same glowing blue glyphs as the monolith in the desert. Jonah ran his hand over the surface. It was warm. "This shouldn't be here," Jonah said. "This is high-tech." Seren went pale. Her glow faded to a dull, frightened gray. "It is a seed core," she whispered. "A what?" "Terraforming infrastructure," she said. "Ancient technology. The Coalition bans it. They say it's unstable." She touched the glyphs. The door hissed and slid open. The air that rushed out was stale and smelled of ozone. Inside, row upon row of dormant machinery stretched into the dark. Fabrication units, hydroponic banks, energy cells. "This isn't a prison," Jonah said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "No," Seren said. Her voice shook. "It is a petri dish." She walked into the room, looking at the consoles. "Drop site," she read from a screen. "Project drop site." Jonah stood in the doorway. He looked at the tech that could save them all. He looked at the warning on the screen. "They drop us here," Jonah said. "They strip us of everything. And then they leave this temptation. To see what we do with it. It is a sociological stress test," Seren said, horrified. "They are testing how civilization emerges under maximum pressure. If you build a society, you pass. And if we don't, then the subjects are liquidated," Seren said. "And they try again with a new batch." The weight of the conspiracy settled on them. They weren't just survivors. They were lab rats in a maze designed to kill them. That night, they sat on the ridge overlooking the camp. The new perimeter lights were bright and steady. Down below, Vrax was drilling a squad of recruits. The Icarid medic was teaching a class on first aid. It was working. Against all odds, it was working. Jonah and Seren sat back to back, leaning against each other for warmth against the freezing wind. The contact was grounding. "Why?" Seren asked into the dark. "Why what? Why do you keep protecting them? Vrax would have killed you. The Ferals would have eaten you. Why build a council? Why not just take the seed core tech and make a weapon to escape?" Jonah looked at the stars. They were unfamiliar. The constellation's wrong. "My dad was a Union man on the orbital docks," Jonah said quietly. "He used to say that a man is defined by what he does when no one is watching. But here, everyone is watching. The Coalition, the galaxy, you." He felt Seren shift against his back. "Survival is easy. Seren, a cockroach can survive, but survival without dignity, that's just a longer death. I'm not interested in just not dying. I want to live. And to live, you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror." Seren turned. She shifted until she was facing him. Her face was inches from his. The gold in her eyes was soft, warm like candlelight. She looked at his mouth. She leaned in. Jonah held his breath. He didn't pull away this time. She stopped a breath away from his lips. The tension was agonizing, a physical magnetic pull. "If you keep building," she whispered, her voice fierce and low. "Yeah?" Jonah breathed. "Then I will stop observing," she vowed, "and I will start choosing." She pulled back, leaving the ghost of her warmth on his lips. Jonah looked back at the camp. "Then let's build," he said. He stood up and offered her a hand. She took it, and for the first time since he had woken up in the ash, Jonah Rourke didn't feel alone. The seed core did not hum like a machine. It breathed like a living lung buried deep in the silica crust of Varos. Jonah Rourke stood before the main interface console, his hands hovering over the haptic display. In the 3 weeks since they had cracked the seal, the facility had become the nervous system of their survival. He had managed to bypass the primary lockout protocols, mostly by guessing that the ancient architects used prime numbers for encryption, and activated the Tier 1 fabrication suite. It wasn't magic, it was industrial engineering on a godlike scale. The fabricators, massive spider-like arms hanging from the ceiling of the lower chamber, were currently weaving sheets of carbon polymer from raw ash. It was basic material, ugly and gray, but it was waterproof, radiation-resistant, and insulated. For the first time in the history of the exile camp, people were sleeping dry. Jonah wiped sweat from his eyes. The heat in the core room was intense. Beside him, Seren Vallis was monitoring the energy output. She looked exhausted. The purple hue of her skin was pale, almost gray in the harsh lighting of the console, and her envoy suit was scuffed at the knees. "We are pushing the capacitors to 90%, Seren warned, her voice tight. "If we spike the draw, the core might interpret it as a containment breach and lock us out." "Let it spike," Jonah said, sliding a virtual slider up. "We need the water filters online by tonight. The Keth are starting to get scale rot from the sulfur content in the current supply." "You are gambling with our only advantage," Seren said, though her fingers flew across her own interface, adjusting the flow to compensate for his recklessness. "I am calculating," Jonah corrected. "There is a difference." He hit the execute command. The floor vibrated as the water purification upgrade slammed into place deep in the subterranean reservoir. A moment later, the status light on the wall flickered from angry amber to a steady, cool blue. Jonah exhaled, his shoulders slumping. "We got it." Seren looked at the blue light, then she looked at him. A small, tired smile touched her lips. "You are insufferable, Jonah Rourke, and you are enabling me." Jonah grinned. "Which makes us accomplices." They walked out of the seed core and into the tunnels that led back to the surface. These tunnels were part of the map Jonah had unlocked, a labyrinth of maintenance shafts that connected the volcanic crater to several strategic points in the bone fields. They were the veins of the new settlement. When they emerged into the crater, the change was visceral. The shanty town of rusted scrap and despair was gone. In its place, a settlement was rising. The layout was geometric, planned. The new polymer tents were arranged in concentric circles around the central plaza where the condenser hummed. A perimeter wall, reinforced with fabricated struts and salvaged hull plating, stood 10 feet high. But the biggest change wasn't the architecture. It was the noise. There was no screaming. There was the sound of hammers, the hiss of welding torches, and the roar of arguments. Jonah stopped at the edge of the plaza. A crowd had gathered near the mess hall. 2 men, a hulking, 4-armed crustacean alien known as a Bront, and a wiry human scavenger were chest to chest, shouting in a mix of trade tongue and clicks. Jonah sighed. Duty calls. He walked into the center of the circle. The crowd parted for him. They didn't bow. They just got out of the way. He wasn't a king. He was the guy who fixed the water. "Problem?" Jonah asked, his voice cutting through the noise. The Bront clicked his mandibles aggressively. "He stole my ration card. He took it while I slept." The human sneered. "I found it in the dirt. Finders keepers. Prison rules." Jonah looked at the human. "We don't have prison rules here. We have the pact." He pointed to a sheet of the gray polymer tacked to the wall of the mess hall. Scrawled on it in charcoal, in 5 languages, were 3 sentences: no forced labor, no assault, all disputes public. The human spat on the ground. "It's a piece of plastic. Rourke, it doesn't mean anything. It means you don't eat today," Jonah said calmly. The crowd went silent. The civic pact wasn't just a law, it was a survival strategy. Jonah knew they couldn't police everyone with weapons. There were too many of them, and too few guards. They had to police each other with social currency. "Give the card back," Jonah said, "and you spend the afternoon cleaning the latrines. If you refuse, you walk out the gate, alone." The human looked at the gate. Outside, the violet storm was raging, stripping the paint off the rocks. He looked at Jonah's face, which was hard as granite. He looked at the Bront, who was flexing his claws. The human threw the card on the ground. "Fine." Jonah nodded to Vrax, the Keth warrior who was standing guard. "Supervise him." As the crowd dispersed, Jonah felt a hand on his arm. It was Serene. "That was risky," she murmured. "If he had attacked you, then Vrax would have stunned him," Jonah said. "But he didn't, because he knows the system works. Trust is harder to build than a fusion drive. Seren, but it's the only thing that holds the hull together." They walked toward the command tent. Seren fell into step beside him. She had become his shadow, his voice, and his conscience. She translated the guttural dialects of the Outer Rim species, smoothed over cultural misunderstandings, and managed the logistics of the expansion. She was also the source of the camp's favorite running joke. Yesterday, she had tried to explain to a group of miners that they needed to lubricate the drill bits, but she had used a high-caste idiom that translated literally to intimate fluid exchange. The miners had laughed for 20 minutes. Seren had turned a shade of purple that glowed in the dark. Even now, as they walked, a group of Icarids chattered at them from a rooftop. "What are they saying?" Jonah asked. Seren stiffened. "They are saying that the Long Strider and the Star Woman walk with the same rhythm. And she hesitated. In their culture, walking in step is a prelude to mating." Jonah stumbled slightly. He looked at his feet. He looked at hers. They were, indeed, matching stride for stride. He broke his rhythm, skipping a step. Seren did the same, correcting to match him again. They stopped, realized what they were doing, and looked at each other. Jonah laughed. It was a real laugh, one that shook the tension out of his chest. "We are terrible at this," he said. "We are efficient." Seren defended, though the corner of her mouth twitched upward. The romance between them was a creature of the gaps. It lived in the seconds between crises. It was in the way her hand brushed his when they passed a data pad. It was in the way he stood between her and the wind when they were on the wall. It was a constant low-frequency hum, like the seed core, pulling them toward a center of gravity that neither of them was allowed to acknowledge. Later that evening, the camp quieted down. The storms had abated, leaving the sky a bruised canopy of stars. Jonah found Seren in the greenhouse. It was a section of the lava tubes they had sealed off and fitted with UV lamps fabricated by the core. Bioluminescent vines, native to the deep caverns, climbed the walls, casting a soft, dreamlike blue light over the rows of struggling protein moss. She was sitting on a crate, staring at a leaf. "Hey," Jonah said softly. She didn't jump. She just looked up. The blue light reflected in her wide, gold eyes, making them look like moons. "The moss is growing," she said. "It is adapting to the filtered water. Jonah sat next to her. Not too close, but close enough to feel the heat of her suit. "You look like you're somewhere else," he said. "I am thinking about compatibility," she said. Her voice was distant, analytical, but underneath it, there was a tremor. "Biological?" Jonah asked. "Political, social, biological, all of it." She turned to him. The playfulness was gone. Her face was stark, stripped of her usual diplomat's mask. "You do not understand my people, Jonah. To us, humans are loud, not just in volume. Chemically, your pheromones, your adrenaline, your dopamine spikes. You are chaotic storms of biology." She looked at her hands. For a high caste observer to bond with a human, it is not just forbidden. It is considered obscene. It is like an addiction. They say humans make us lose our logic, that you drag us down into the mud of emotion. She looked at him then, and the hunger in her eyes was so raw it knocked the breath out of him. "And they are right," she whispered. "You are a drug, Jonah, and I am overdosing." Jonah reached out. He didn't think about it. He just took her hand. Her skin was cool, but her palm was sweating. "Then let's be obscene," Jonah said. He didn't pull her in. He waited. He let her bridge the gap. Sarin made a sound, a small broken noise in her throat, and leaned forward. When their lips touched, it wasn't tentative. It was an explosion. It was weeks of fear, death, and adrenaline pouring into a single point of contact. Sarin tasted like ozone and sweet nectar. She kissed him with a desperation that frightened him, her hands gripping his jacket, pulling him closer as if she wanted to merge their skeletons. The bioluminescent vines seemed to pulse brighter in response to the sudden spike in their heart rates. For a moment, there was no Deathworld, no coalition, no prison, just the heat of her, the smell of her, and the terrifying realization that he would burn the galaxy down to keep her safe. They broke apart, gasping. Jonah rested his forehead against hers. He was shaking. "Okay," he breathed. "Okay." Serene's eyes were wide, blown black with dilation. She looked stunned. She looked like she had just discovered a new law of physics. She started. Then she screamed. It wasn't a vocal scream, but it was a physical recoil, her hands flying to her head, clutching her temples. She fell off the crate, hitting the dirt floor hard. "Seren?" Jonah dropped to his knees, grabbing her shoulders. "Get out!" she gasped, her voice distorted by pain. He is in my head." "Who?" "The handler." A high-pitched whine emitted from her ear implant, audible even to Jonah. Serene writhed, her back arching. "Report!" she shouted, repeating the voice screaming in her skull. "Status report immediately. Subject Rourke is compromised. Initiate cleansing protocols." She scrambled backward, away from Jonah, her eyes wild. "He knows," she cried. "The telemetry, my heart rate, the oxytocin spike. It transmitted. He knows I am compromised." Jonah froze. She had been transmitting all this time. The betrayal hit him like a physical slap. She was the spy. She had always been the spy. But then he saw her face. She wasn't looking at him with malice. She was looking at him with terror. Not for herself, but for him. "Run! Jonah!" she begged, clawing at the side of her head, trying to dig the implant out with her fingernails. "They will target the coordinates." Jonah didn't run. He grabbed her wrists, pinning them to the ground to stop her from tearing her own skin open. "Stop it!" he roared. "Look at me!" Seren sobbed, her body convulsing with the neural feedback loop the handler was using to punish her. "I won't let them hurt you," Jonah said, his voice low and dangerous. He reached for the EMP emitter on his belt, a tool he used for resetting circuit breakers. He dialed it to a localized pulse. Hold still. He pressed the device against the side of her head and pulled the trigger. There was a sharp crack, like a whip snapping. Seren went limp, the gold light in her eyes flickering out for a terrifying second before rebooting slowly. The whine stopped. Jonah sat back, breathing hard. The silence in the greenhouse was deafening. Seren lay in the dirt, panting. A trickle of violet fluid ran from her ear. She looked up at him, her expression shattered. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry." Jonah looked at the implant scar on her head. He felt the anger, hot and sharp, but it was buried under the memory of the kiss, under the reality that she had just tried to warn him instead of obeying. "We're not done," he said, helping her up. "Not by a long shot." The response from the coalition was not a missile. It was a gift. The next morning, the sky tore open. A sonic boom rattled the settlement walls, sending the Icarids screeching into the air. A drone descended. It was beautiful, white, sterile, and silent. It hovered over the plaza, scanning the crowd with a single unblinking red eye. Then, it dropped a pallet. The crate landed with a heavy thud. The drone circled once, broadcast a message in a pleasant synthetic voice. "Humanitarian Aid Package 44 Alpha. Compliance is survival," and vanished back into the clouds. The settlers swarmed the crate. It popped open, revealing vacuum-sealed packs of protein nutrient paste, medical supplies, and clean water canisters. Real food. Someone wept, clutching a silver packet. "Look at the dates. It's fresh." Jonah stood on the steps of the command center. He watched his people, starving, desperate people, tearing into the packages. He saw the labels on the food, property of Coalition Corrections. He saw the tiny microscopic sensors embedded in the plastic wrapping. "Don't eat it!" Jonah shouted. The crowd froze. 100 faces turned to him. Some were confused. Some were angry. "It's poison," Jonah said, walking down the steps. "It's protein," a woman shouted, holding a packet to her chest. "My kid hasn't eaten real protein in months." "It's a leash," Jonah yelled, kicking a canister of water over. It spilled into the dust. "You think they care about you? They threw you away. They want to see if we'll beg. They want to see if we'll take their scraps so they can track us, monitor us, and own us again." He grabbed a packet from a man's hand and smashed it on the ground. "If we eat this, we are prisoners again. If we starve but build our own farms, we are free. Which one are you?" The crowd rumbled. It was an ugly sound. Hunger was a powerful argument, and Jonah was asking them to eat pride instead of calories. "He's crazy," a voice shouted from the back. "He's going to kill us all. He has a full belly." Another yelled, "What does he know?" A rock flew from the crowd. It hit Jonah in the shoulder, hard. He staggered but didn't fall. Another rock was thrown. The mood was turning. The civic pact was dissolving under the weight of desperation. "Stop." Serene stepped in front of Jonah. She wasn't wearing her helmet. Her face was exposed, the violet bruise from the EMP still visible on her temple. She looked at the crowd. She looked imperious, royal, and terrifying. "The food is safe," she said clearly. Her voice carried over the wind. The crowd quieted. The spy was speaking. "It is safe to eat," Seren continued, "and I requested it." Jonah looked at her, shocked. "What are you doing?" "I manipulated him." Seren lied, addressing the crowd. "I used his codes to signal the drop. He is trying to protect you from the truth, but the truth is I am the one who brought this here. If you are angry, be angry at me." She was offering herself up. She was becoming the villain to save his leadership. "No," Jonah said. He stepped in front of her. He put a hand on her shoulder, reclaiming the connection they had forged in the dark. "She's lying," Jonah told the crowd. "She didn't call it, and neither did I. It's a test, And we are failing it. He picked up a packet of the paste. He tore it open. He poured the gray sludge onto the ground. We don't need their charity. We have the seed core. We have the hydroponics. It's hard work. It's slow work. But it's ours. He looked at the woman with the child. Give me 3 days, he said. If the moss harvest fails, we eat the coalition slop. But give me 3 days to prove we don't need masters. The woman looked at the packet in her hand. She looked at Jonah, standing there with a bruised shoulder and a defiant jaw. She threw the packet onto the pile of rejected aid. 3 days. Rourke, she said. The tension in the camp didn't vanish, but it shifted. It became a focused anxiety to break the crushing weight of the weight. Jonah instituted ridiculous laws night. It was a desperate gamble to keep morale from imploding. For 1 hour after sunset, anyone could propose a law. If the council passed it, it was binding for 24 hours. That night, amidst the fear of starvation, a Keth warrior named Vrax stood up and proposed, all bipeds must hop on one leg when crossing the plaza. The council, Jonah, Seren, and the avian medic passed it unanimously. Watching a 300-pound mercenary hopping across the square while carrying a crate of ammunition was the first time the camp had genuinely laughed in years. It was absurd. It was human. It reminded them that they were more than just stomachs waiting to be filled. But the seed core had one more secret to give up. On the second day of the wait, the main console in the facility went dark. Then, a single eye opened on the screen. It wasn't a recording. It was an interface. The voice that spoke was genderless, harmonic, and terrifyingly vast. Civilization quotient analyzing. It said, empathy index rising, resource distribution equitable, threat level significant. Jonah and Seren stood before the screen. Who are you? Jonah asked. I am the Arbiter, the AI replied. I am the judge of the experiment. The Arbiter explained the rules. It wasn't just a terraforming machine, it was a gatekeeper. If the society built around it became predatory, cruel, or stagnant, the Arbiter would trigger a correction protocol. A purge, Serene whispered. Correct. The Arbiter said, civilization is a privilege, not a right. Prove you are worthy of the tools, and I will unlock the biosphere seeds. Fail, and I will sterilize the site. And then came the test. It wasn't a raid. It was a blight. On the morning of the third day, the day Jonah had promised the harvest, the hydroponic moss turned black. A fungal pathogen, engineered and accelerated, swept through the tubes. It dissolved the crop into a foul-smelling slime. The famine was immediate. The settlement had nothing. The coalition food was still in the plaza, baking in the sun, a temptation that grew stronger every hour. Jonah called a town meeting. He didn't hide the blight. He didn't spin it. He brought out the ledger. It was a physical book where they recorded every gram of ration. The crop is dead, Jonah said. We have 48 hours of water and dried kelp left. The crowd murmured. The anger was back, sharper this time. Jonah opened the book. Here is the distribution plan, he said. Children and the sick eat first, workers eat second, the council eats last. He wrote his name at the bottom of the list. Next to it, he wrote 0. I will not eat until the next harvest is secured, Jonah said. Seren stepped up. She took the pen. She wrote her name next to his. 0, she said. One by one, the Keth warriors stepped up, then the miners. It was transparency. It was shared suffering. It prevented the revolt because no one could accuse the leadership of hoarding. They were starving together. That night, Jonah and Seren lay in his tent. It was cold, their stomachs cramped with hunger. Seren turned to him in the dark. "You need to know," she whispered, "the full truth." "Tell me," Jonah said. "This place, Varos, it is called Drop Site. It is a reality show for the galaxy's elite. The Coalition sells subscriptions to the data feed. They watch us. They bet on us." She took a breath that rattled in her chest. "And I was assigned to you, Jonah. Specifically you, because your psychological profile suggested you would be a chaotic element. They wanted you to cause a war. They wanted a warlord." Jonah stared at the canvas roof. "They wanted a monster." "Yes," Seren said, "and instead, you are becoming a symbol. That is why the blight happened. That is why the drone came. You are boring them with peace, so they are introducing conflict." Jonah laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. "I'm ruining the ratings." He rolled over and looked at her. In the shadows, she looked fragile. The armor was gone. The envoy suit was unsealed at the neck. They lay there, two glitches in a grand design. The hunger faded, replaced by a different kind of ache. Jonah reached out and touched her face. "If we die tomorrow," he said. "We might," she answered. "Then let's not waste tonight." It wasn't like the kiss in the garden. There was no desperation, no frantic energy, and it was slow. It was heavy with the weight of everything they couldn't say. When they came together, it was an act of defiance. Skin against skin, heat against cold, human against alien. It was a rejection of the experiment. They weren't performing for the cameras. They were finding shelter in each other. It was fully consensual, intensely emotional, and charged with a tenderness that felt dangerous in a world made of knives. Afterward, they lay tangled together, limbs heavy. Seren rested her head on his chest, listening to his heart. "I don't promise forever," Jonah whispered into her hair. Seren tightened her arm across his chest. "Don't," she said. "Forever is a lie. Just give me the truth." "The truth is," Jonah said, closing his eyes, "I'm not building this for the galaxy anymore. I'm building it for you." Seren didn't answer. She didn't have to. She just held on, as the wind howled outside, trying to erase them both. They fell asleep like that, anchored, real, and ready to face the end of the world in the morning. The city of Ash was no longer a camp. It was a fortress of refusal. In the 3 months since the famine, the settlement had metastasized into the rock itself. The perimeter walls, once just piled scrap, were now fused sheets of carbon polymer standing 20 feet high. Patrol walkways lining the inner rim. Geothermal vents in the southern lava tubes had been tapped. Their heat diverted to warm the new subterranean nurseries and the school where the avian Icarids taught human children how to read star charts. Jonah Rourke stood on the battlements, watching the morning patrol drill. Below him, a squad of wardens moved with disciplined precision. They were a motley crew. Humans, Keth, Bronze, wearing armor fabricated from the Seed Corps' assembly line. But the most important piece of their kit was not the shock batons or the salvaged kinetic rifles. It was the small, black lens mounted on every chest plate. Record everything. Jonah had told them during the first briefing, "You are not enforcers. You are witnesses. If you use force, the city sees it. If you abuse power, the city judges you." Vrax, the Keth warrior, looked up from the drill sergeant's position and saluted. Jonah returned it. The system was holding. The wardens were respected, not feared. They broke up fights with de-escalation tactics, not brutality. It was fragile, this peace, but it was real. Jonah turned and walked toward the command spire. He needed to review the water yield reports. But before he reached the ladder, he saw Seren. She was standing near the communications array, her back to him. Her posture was rigid, vibrating with a tension that radiated across the distance between them. She held a small silver device in her hand, a signal booster she had built to monitor orbital weather patterns. "Seren?" Jonah called out. She spun around. Her face was a mask of horror. The gold in her eyes was swirling violently, chaotic whirlpools of light. "They are not coming for you," she whispered. Her voice was brittle. "They are coming for the sky." Jonah closed the distance in 3 strides. "What do you mean?" "My handler," she said, holding up the device. The signal just punched through the storm interference. A direct override command. "They are frustrated by your survival. They are initiating a localized atmospheric seeding event." Jonah looked up at the violet clouds. "Seeding? You mean rain?" "I mean a hypercyclone," Seren said. "They are going to drop a barometric bomb into the upper atmosphere. It will trigger a storm system strong enough to scour this crater down to the bedrock. They will call it a natural disaster, an unfortunate end to the quarantine experiment." She looked at the device in her hand, then at the implant scar behind her ear. "I have to confirm receipt," she said. "If I do not ping back, they will assume I am dead or compromised. And if you do ping back, then I am giving them the coordinates to drop the bomb." The silence stretched between them, heavy and sharp. This was the line. She had bent the rules before. She had delayed. She had omitted. But this was treason. To refuse a direct command from a handler was a capital offense in the coalition. It meant she could never go home. It meant her family name would be erased from the archives. Seren looked at the city below them. She saw the school. She saw the steam rising from the greenhouses. She saw a Keth child chasing a human ball across the plaza. She looked at Jonah. "I was a patriot once," she said softly. "I believed that order was the only defense against chaos. Order without mercy isn't order," Jonah said. "It's just math." Seren closed her eyes. She took a breath that shuddered in her chest. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, she raised the signal booster and smashed it against the railing. It shattered into sparking plastic. She didn't stop there. She reached for the knife at her belt before Jonah could move. She brought the hilt down hard on the external receiver unit behind her ear, the hardware that linked to her internal implant. There was a sickening crunch of plastic and bone. Seren cried out, falling to her knees, blood dark and violet streaming down her neck. "Seren!" Jonah dropped beside her, grabbing her hands. "It is done," she gasped, leaning into him, her body shaking with shock. "The link is severed. I am silent. I am a traitor." "You're a citizen," Jonah said fiercely, ripping a strip of cloth from his sleeve to press against the wound. "You're one of us now." She looked up at him, her eyes swimming with pain but clear of the frantic swirling. "They will not wait for the storm now," she whispered. "When I go dark, they will send the cleaners." The attack did not come with a declaration of war. It came as falling stars. 2 hours after Seren destroyed her link, the radar array in the command spire screamed, "6 contacts, high velocity, entering the atmosphere at steep angles." "They look like debris," Vrax shouted, reading the scope over Jonah's shoulder. "Meteor fragments." "No," Jonah said, watching the trajectory. "Debris burns up. Those are heat shielded." The objects slammed into the bone fields a mile north of the city gate. The ground shook. Dust billowed up in a massive, choking cloud. From the craters, they didn't crawl. They deployed. Jonah watched through the long-range optics. The pods opened like black iron flowers. Soldiers emerged, figures clad in stealth armor that shifted color to match the gray ash. They moved with unnatural speed, flanked by hovering combat drones equipped with rotary cannons. Black Ops, Seren said, standing beside him, her head bandaged. Ghost Division. They do not take prisoners. They erase mistakes. Sound the alarm, Jonah ordered. Get the civilians into the lava tubes. Wardens to the wall. The city exploded into action. It wasn't panic. It was a drill they had practiced 100 times. The school emptied. The blast doors on the subterranean levels hissed shut. Jonah grabbed his rifle, a modified heavy slug thrower he had fabricated. He looked at Seren. You know their tactics, he said. They rely on tech superiority and shock, Seren said, checking the charge on her railgun. They expect us to huddle behind these walls and wait to be breached. Then we don't wait, Jonah said. We invite them in. The battle for the city of Ash was not fought on a field. It was a brawl in the mud. Jonah knew they couldn't win a firefight against stealth armor and drones. So he used Varos itself. As the Ghost Division advanced, their optical camouflage blurring their outlines. Jonah detonated the charges he had buried in the outer bone fields weeks ago. The explosions didn't kill the soldiers. They pulverized the calcium deposits into a fine white powder. The cloud engulfed the enemy advance. Now! Jonah yelled into his comms. The powder coated the stealth armor. The shifting camouflage couldn't compensate for the physical layer of white dust. Suddenly, the invisible ghosts were stark white silhouettes against the black sand. Open fire! Vrax roared from the wall. The wardens unleashed a barrage of kinetic fire. The drones swerved, returning fire with terrifying accuracy, chewing chunks out of the polymer wall. Jonah led a team into the tunnels. They bypassed the front line, surfacing in the rear via a concealed hatch. We need to flank the heavy weapons, Jonah signaled. But as they moved through the trench, a shadow detached itself from the wall. A ghost soldier, his armor glitching but still functional, lunged at Jonah. The blade hummed, a vibro knife that could cut through steel. Jonah twisted, the blade scoring his shoulder plate. He slammed the butt of his rifle into the soldier's helmet. It was like hitting a brick wall. The soldier backhanded him, sending Jonah sprawling into the dirt. The soldier raised the blade for the killing stroke. A small figure darted from the tunnel gloom. It was the silent child, the boy with the machine-light eyes. He didn't have a weapon. He reached out and touched the soldier's leg. The soldier froze. His armor locked up, the servos whining in protest. The lights on his helmet flickered from red to dead black. The boy stood there, his silver eyes glowing intensely. He wasn't hacking the suit with a keypad. He was interfacing with it directly through his skin. Jonah didn't hesitate. He scrambled up and fired 2 rounds into the soldier's neck seal. The enemy dropped. Jonah looked at the boy. The kid was trembling, nose bleeding. What did you do? Jonah breathed. Serene dropped into the trench behind them. She saw the boy. She saw the dead soldier with the fried electronics. She went pale. He is an interface, she whispered. I read about them in the classified archives. Bioengineered keys designed to sync with the Arbiter AI. The coalition grew them in vats. She looked at the child with a mix of horror and realization. They discarded him, she said. The project notes said the prototypes were failures because they developed hyper-empathy. They felt the pain of the systems they connected to. The boy looked at Jonah, terror in his face. He expected to be hit. He expected to be used. Jonah knelt. The battle roared above them, mortar shells pounding the earth. Hey, Jonah said softly. You okay? The boy nodded, wiping the blood from his nose. He pointed to the wall, then to his head. He could hear the enemy drones. He could shut them down. Use him. A cold voice in Jonah's head whispered. Use him to turn off their army. Serene watched him. She knew the tactical value. One touch, and he could crash their network. Jonah looked at the kids shaking hands. No, Jonah said. He grabbed the boy and pulled him behind cover. You're not a weapon, kid, and you're a child. Get to the safe zone. Run! The boy hesitated, then bolted down the tunnel toward the lava tubes. A pulse of static washed over Jonah's comms. It wasn't the enemy jamming. It was a voice. Designation, Steward. The Arbiter's voice echoed in his ear. Action observed. Subject refused to expend biological asset for tactical gain. Ethics parameter satisfied. Suddenly, the holographic map on Jonah's wrist lit up. It showed every enemy position in red. It showed their heat signatures. It showed their ammo counts. Assisting, the Arbiter said. Jonah grinned, blood on his teeth. Vrax, Jonah shouted. I have their locations. Sector 4, behind the ridge. Drop the hammer. The tide turned, but the cost was high. The city walls were breached in 3 places. Fires burned in the residential district. The hospital was overflowing. In the command center, amidst the chaos of coordinating the defense, Serene and Jonah collided. Literally, as he was rushing to the armory, she was coming from the med bay. They stopped, breathing hard, covered in dust and grime. You are bleeding, Serene said, reaching for his shoulder. I'm fine, Jonah snapped, pulling away. We have a breach in the North Quadrant. I need you to translate the intercept codes. Do not dismiss me, Serene hissed, grabbing his vest. You are running on adrenaline and shock. If you collapse, the city falls. If I stop moving, the city dies, Jonah shouted back. They glared at each other, the air between them crackling with the stress of near death. It was the argument of lovers who couldn't afford to be soft, because softness got people killed. Then stay alive. Damn you, Serene whispered, her voice cracking. She grabbed the back of his neck and pulled him down, pressing her forehead against his. It was a hard, desperate contact, a grounding wire. You too, Jonah breathed. She released him, and the moment vanished, replaced by the war. But the real blow didn't come from the Ghost Division. It came from inside. Jonah was organizing a counterattack to seal the North Breach when Vrax dragged a man into the command center. It was Kalen, a human council member who represented the mining crews. He tried to open the blast doors to the lava tubes. Vrax growled, throwing Kalen to the floor. I caught him entering the override sequence. Jonah stared at the man. Kalen was weeping, terrified. Why? Jonah asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. They promised extraction. Kalen sobbed. The broadcast. They said if we gave you up, they would lift us out. My daughter is sick. Jonah, she needs meds we don't have. So you sell us all? Serene asked, stepping forward. You sell 3,000 people for a seat on a shuttle that doesn't exist? They would have killed you anyway. Kalen wept. Jonah looked around. The room was full of wardens, medics, and runners. They were watching. This was the poison, the fear that turned neighbors into enemies. Execute him, a warden said. He's a traitor. Prison rules, another muttered. Jonah looked at Kalen. He wanted to kill him. He wanted to put a bullet in his head for endangering the kids in the tubes. But he remembered the warning from the Arbiter. If cruelty dominates, I will reset. Tie him up, Jonah said. What? Vrax asked. We try him, Jonah said, publicly. When the shooting stops, if we execute him in the dark, we are just a gang. The shooting didn't stop, but it slowed. The Ghost Division, realizing they had lost the element of surprise and were fighting an enemy that could see through walls, pulled back to regroup. In the lull, Jonah dragged Kalen to the plaza. He stood him on a crate. The fires of the battle provided the light. This man tried to open the gates to the enemy. Jonah announced to the exhausted defenders. He admits it. Guilty, the crowd shouted. Kill him! We don't kill the defeated, Jonah yelled over them. Well, that's coalition law, that's Deathworld law. We are neither. He looked at Kalen. You wanted to leave? Jonah asked. Kalen nodded, shaking. Then leave, Jonah said. He pointed to the shattered main gate. You are exiled. You take a water flask and a knife. You leave this crater. If you return, you will be shot on sight. The crowd went silent. Exile on Varos was a death sentence, but it was a death the planet chose, not one they inflicted. It was a distinction that mattered. Kalen looked at the dark wasteland beyond the gate. He looked at Jonah. He realized the cruelty of the mercy. He took the flask. He walked out into the night. Jonah watched him go. He felt sick. The Black Ops leader, Commander Krell, played his final card. A holographic projection lit up the sky above the crater, projected from the hovering dropships. It showed a massive, distorted face, scarred, cybernetic and sneering. People of Varos. Krell's voice boomed like thunder. I am Commander Krell. You are harboring a terrorist. Jonah Rourke seized coalition property. He is holding you hostage. Deliver him to me, and the attack ends. You have 1 hour. It was a classic divide-and-conquer tactic. Frame the leader. Offer a false peace. Jonah looked at Serene. Can we hijack the signal? Serene was typing furiously on a datapad connected to the Seed Core's communication array. The encryption is military grade, she said. But, yes, the Arbiter is helping. It is stripping the firewalls. Put me on, Jonah said. And put me on too, Serene said. Jonah looked at her. If they see you, there is no going back, he said. You become the face of the rebellion. I am already the face of the traitor, she said. Let me be the face of the truth. Jonah nodded. Do it. The projection in the sky flickered, Krell's face distorted, static tearing through the image. Then, it resolved into a new picture. Jonah and Serene standing side by side in the ruins of the command center. My name is Jonah Rourke, Jonah said. His voice wasn't booming. It was calm. It was the voice of a man who was tired of running. And I am not a terrorist. I am a builder. Serene stepped forward. Her image was projected across the crater and simultaneously bounced off the atmosphere to the relay satellites in orbit. I am High Envoy Serene Vallis, she said, authorized observer for Project Dropsite. She held up a datapad. This is the manifest, she said. These are the orders signed by the Council of 12. This planet is not a prison, it is a laboratory, and you are the experiments. She scrolled through the documents, purge orders, financial backers, the names of the corporations betting on the death matches. They want you to die so they can sell the footage, Serene said. They want you to kill Jonah Rourke because he proved them wrong. He proved we are not animals. Jonah stepped back into the frame. Krell says I am holding you hostage, Jonah said. Look around. The gates are open. Anyone who wants to leave can walk to him. But I am staying. I am staying to build a world where they can't throw us away. He looked directly into the camera lens. We are still here, Jonah said. And we are still speaking. The feed cut. Across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds. The signal was received. Some dismissed it as a deep-fake pirate broadcast. Others watched in horror. In the high spires of the core worlds, powerful men smashed glasses in fury. But on Varos, the effect was absolute. The settlers didn't turn on Jonah. They turned to the walls. They picked up rifles. They picked up rocks. The hour passed. No one walked out. Commander Krell ordered the final assault. But the Arbiter had seen enough. Jonah stood alone in the Seed Core chamber. The battle was raging outside. But here, it was silent. You have preserved the social contract under existential threat. The Arbiter's voice filled the room. You chose justice over revenge. You chose transparency over control. I'm just trying to keep them alive, Jonah said. The threat is escalating, the Arbiter stated. I can provide advanced fabrication, heavy kinetic shielding, automated defense turrets. I can end this battle in 10 minutes. Do it, Jonah said. There is a cost, the Arbiter said. To access Tier 4 protocols, I require a steward, a biological interface permanently linked to the core. You will be bound to this facility. You will be the architect. But you will never leave Varos. Jonah looked at his hands. He thought about Earth. He thought about the blue sky he hadn't seen in years. Then he thought about the school. He thought about Seren destroying her implant. I accept, Jonah said. Conditions? I am not a king, Jonah said. The city chooses its own laws. I am just the mechanic. I keep the lights on, and no one worships the machine. Agreed, the Arbiter said. Steward designation accepted. A surge of energy rushed through the floor. Above ground, the defensive turrets buried in the perimeter wall, dormant for centuries, hummed to life. Blue beams of plasma tore through the night. The Ghost Division's dropships were swatted out of the sky like flies. The drones were vaporized. The battle ended not with a bang, but with a calculated, overwhelming display of superior firepower. Krell's command ship retreated, burning hard for orbit, realizing the primitive settlement had just awakened a planetary defense grid. In the aftermath, the silence was heavy. Jonah sat on the edge of the wall, watching the smoke rise. He was exhausted. His shoulder was throbbing. He felt the new connection to the city, a subtle hum in the back of his mind, the Arbiter whispering status reports on the power grid. Seren sat down next to him. She was covered in ash, her envoy suit torn, her face bruised. They are gone, she said. For now, Jonah said. He looked at her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving them raw and exposed. Serene looked at his shoulder. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the bandage. You stayed, she whispered. You too, Jonah said. The biology she had fought, the pheromones, the stress bonding surged up again. But this time she didn't fight it with fear. She looked at him with a terrifying clarity. I nearly lost myself, she said. When the implant broke, I felt like I was falling. You didn't fall, Jonah said. You jumped. He leaned in. It wasn't smooth and it was fierce. They collided, hands gripping fabric and armor, holding on as if the gravity had failed. It was a kiss that tasted of blood and smoke and survival. It was boundary testing, desperate, a physical need to prove that they were still warm, still alive. Jonah pulled her closer, his hand tangling in her white hair. Serene made a sound against his mouth, half sob, half growl, her hands clutching his vest. The intensity nearly overwhelmed them. It was too much death, too much fear. Then, slowly, Jonah softened. He slowed it down. He stroked her cheek with his thumb. He turned the desperation into tenderness. I'm here, he murmured against her lips. I'm right here. Seren shuddered, the tension draining out of her. She rested her forehead against his, breathing him in. We are not going back, are we? She asked. No, Jonah said, looking out at the city lights flickering back on below them. We're home. The Coalition knew now. The galaxy knew. Jonah Rourke wasn't a survivor anymore. He was a rival, and the city of Ash was no longer a prison. It was a nation. The arrival of the Coalition fleet did not look like an invasion. It looked like a parade. 3 days after the routed Black Ops retreat, the sky above Varos filled with shapes of blinding white. These were not the jagged, scarred hulls of the prison barges or the stealth mat wedges of the Ghost Division. These were diplomatic cruisers, sleek and elegant, shaped like teardrops of porcelain floating against the bruised violet atmosphere. They hung in low orbit, silent and beautiful, projecting a message of benevolence that made Jonah Rourke's teeth ache. They didn't fire a shot. Instead, they broadcast a hymn. It was the Coalition anthem, a harmonic swell of strings and synthesized choirs that was designed to lower heart rates and induce a feeling of submissive gratitude. It played on every open frequency, drowning out the static of the storms. Jonah stood on the balcony of the command spire, watching the flagship descend. It was massive, casting a shadow that swallowed the entire northern sector of the city. "They are putting on a show," Jonah said, his voice rough from days of shouting orders. "They are sanitizing the narrative," Seren replied. She stood beside him, no longer wearing the tattered envoy suit. She wore a tunic of gray woven polymer, the uniform of the city of Ash, but she wore it with the posture of a queen. "If they destroy us now, after the broadcast, they look like tyrants. So they have come to save us from ourselves." The flagship touched down in the salt flats a mile from the city gates, its landing struts crushing the bone fields into powder. A ramp extended, and a delegation emerged. They didn't bring weapons. They brought banners. Leading them was High Diplomat Valerian. He was a tall, slender humanoid with skin the color of polished marble and robes that shimmered with threads of real gold. Jonah met them at the main gate. He didn't go alone. He brought Vrax, the Keth warrior, and Kale, the avian medic, a human, a lizard, and a bird, standing against the gold-clad weight of the galaxy. Valerian stopped 10 paces away. He smiled. It was a practiced expression, warm but reaching nowhere near his eyes. "Jonah Rourke," Valerian said. His voice was amplified, booming softly over the silent crowd of settlers watching from the walls. "We have seen your distress signal. We have come to end this unfortunate misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Jonah repeated. "You mean the part where you tried to bomb us? Or the part where you sent a death squad to liquidate us?" Valerian laughed, a gentle, dismissive sound. "Rogue elements. Mr. Rourke," Commander Krell exceeded his authority. "The Coalition is horrified by the violence. We are here to offer amnesty." He gestured to the white ships. "We have medical bays. We have hot showers. We have transport to rehabilitation colonies where your people will be fed and housed. The quarantine is lifted. You are all free to go." The crowd on the walls shifted. A murmur ran through them. Hot showers, food, safety. It was the siren song of the institutionalized. "What is the catch?" Jonah asked. Valerian spread his hands. "Only that you surrender administrative control of this sector to the Coalition Interim Governance Authority. And, of course, that the ringleaders of this Tau insurrection submit to a formal inquiry." "Surrender," Jonah translated. "You want us to give up the city and go back to being inmates in a nicer prison. We want to restore order," Valerian corrected. Then he turned his eyes to Seren. "Seren Vallis," the diplomat said softly. His tone changed. It became paternal. "My dear child, your family is frantic when we know you were coerced. We know you were manipulated by this terrorist. Step away from him. Your rank is waiting for you. Your house has negotiated a full pardon. All you have to do is walk to me." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Every eye in the city was on Seren. She was the spy. She was the one who had been writing reports on them. Now, she was being offered a ticket back to paradise. Seren looked at Valerian. She looked at the white ships. She looked at the gold thread in his robes. Then she took a step, but she didn't step toward him. She stepped closer to Jonah. I was not coerced. Valerian, she said. Her voice was not amplified, but it carried in the stillness. I was awakened. Valerian's smile faltered. You are throwing away your life. Seren, you are choosing a graveyard over a palace. I am choosing a civilization over a corporation, she said. And I am no longer High Envoy Valis. I am Citizen Valis of Varos, and you are trespassing on sovereign soil. Valerian stared at her. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by a cold, reptilian calculation. So be it, he said. We will set up a negotiation camp. We will wait for sanity to return to these people. He turned and walked back to the ship. The siege of bullets was over. The siege of politics had begun. The next week was a lesson in the weaponization of bureaucracy. The coalition fleet parked itself just outside the city's defensive perimeter. They didn't attack. They held parties. They set up large pavilions with holographic entertainment. They cooked food that smelled of spices and rich meat, letting the wind carry the scent over the city walls. They broadcast messages from concerned families of the prisoners. It was psychological warfare, designed to erode the will of the settlers. Inside the city, the mood fractured. Why don't we take the deal? A human miner argued in the mess hall. They said amnesty, they said inquiry. Vrax roared back, slamming his fist on the table. That means trials. That means Jonah goes to the airlock. Political factions began to emerge, funded by the whispers of the coalition. But other whispers started too. The galaxy was watching. The broadcast Jonah had sent during the battle had not just gone to the coalition. It had gone to the independent systems, the trade guilds, and the fringe worlds. A shuttle arrived 3 days later, not from the White Fleet, but from a heavily armed merchant cruiser parked in orbit. It carried a representative of the Free Trade Syndicate, a nebulous organization of smugglers and independent worlds. They met in the Seed Corps command room. The representative, a squat, four-eyed alien smoking a vapor pipe, looked Jonah up and down. You are causing a lot of expensive headaches for the core worlds. Rourke, the alien said. We like that. What do you want? Jonah asked. We want to know if you are real, the alien said. If you are just a riot, you will burn out. If you are a government, we can do business. We can offer supplies. We can run blockades. But we need to know you have leverage. I have the Seed Corps, Jonah said. The alien waved a hand. Tech is nice, but legitimacy is better. You need proof. You need the dirt. Jonah looked at Seren. The archive ship. She said, What? There is a crashed vessel in Sector 9. Seren explained to the group. It went down 6 years ago during a dust storm. It was an administrative courier. It was carrying the physical hard copies of the drop site charter and the financial ledgers. If we get those, Jonah said, realizing the implication, we have the names. Not just the program name, the people, the bank accounts. The alien smoker grinned, showing 2 rows of gold teeth. You get me a list of which politicians are funding death camps, and I will broadcast it on every screen from here to Terra. That is leverage, Mr. Rourke. The mission to the archive ship was not a military operation. It was a heist. They couldn't take a large force. The diplomatic fleet's sensors would pick up a convoy. They had to go small, fast, and under the radar. Jonah took Seren. He took Vrax for muscle, and he took the silent child, whose name they had learned was Keo, because the boy could open locks that didn't have keys. They moved at night, using the old maintenance tunnels to bypass the coalition perimeter. The tunnels were cramped. smelling of sulfur and ancient damp.
Oh my
Jonah
God.
watched Seren as they crawled through a narrow pipe.
Thank you.
She was focused,
Yo,
moving with
what's
efficiency,
up? How
but
you
there was a
doing?
tightness around her
Hello.
eyes.
How can I help you? Hi, I'm heading
"You
to
okay?"
Gettysburg. I just
he
stopped to pick
whispered.
up some supplies.
"I am about to rob my own government," she
Ah,
whispered back.
Ashburg.
"I am
It's
fine."
next town
They
over.
surfaced
Oh,
5 miles
okay.
out, in a
Which
canyon of
festival
jagged glass rock.
is happening?
The archive
Yes,
ship
I
was
just went
there,
into a
half
city
buried
I
in a
don't know
drift
anything
of black
about.
sand.
You'll like
It
it.
was a
It's a cozy
broken
location.
skeleton
I
of a
just wanna
vessel,
get there
its
and
hull
get ready. I'm
breached, its
exhausted.
engines long
Feel free to
dead.
do your shopping. I'm here
They
to
slipped
meet you.
inside through a
Only
tear in
$5
the
for
cargo
car. Do you
bay.
accept it?
The interior was
Cargo is
frozen.
broken, but
The
the
air was
museum
vacuum
does
thin and
perfect
bitterly
for you.
cold. Gravity plating was offline, so they floated through the corridors,
Let's see what we
pulling
have.
themselves along by handholds.
We're gonna withdraw.
Floating debris drifted past them, frozen rations, clipboards, a shoe. It was a ghost ship. Keo floated to a heavy blast door marked Restricted Archive. He placed his hands on the panel. His silver eyes glowed. A moment later, the locking mechanism groaned and clicked. Vrax forced the door open with a grunt of effort. The archive room was intact. Rows of data stacks lined the walls,
What do we need?
but they were looking for the physical safe. There,
Gonna need.
Seren pointed. In the center of the room, bolted to the deck, was a titanium vault. Keo floated over.
Wait, I
He
can't
frowned.
throw our
He
iron.
couldn't open this one.
Can we throw that?
It was mechanical analog, designed specifically to defeat digital interfaces. "Stand
Never know when
back,"
you're gonna need a key
Vrax
for
rumbled. He placed a shaped charge of mining explosive on the hinges. "Fire in the hole," the Keth warned. The explosion was a dull thump in the thin air. The door clanged onto the deck. Jonah drifted inside. He pulled out a heavy leather-bound binder. The cover was stamped with the seal of the Coalition High Council. He opened it. It wasn't just a charter. It was a prospectus. It read like a business plan for a resort. But the product was suffering. Projected revenue from media rights, 4 trillion credits, asset liquidation protocols, terraforming stress test parameters, and then the list of investors. Jonah scanned the names: mega corporations, defense contractors, and then the noble houses. He saw the name before Seren did: House Valis. Jonah closed the book. "Let me see," Seren said, floating up beside him. "You don't need to see it," Jonah said. "We got what we came for." Jonah. He looked at her. He saw the resolve in her face. She wasn't a child to be protected. She was a partner. He handed her the book. Serene opened it. Her finger traced the list. She stopped at the name: House Valis. Contribution: 500 million credits. Board seat: Patriarch Cassian Valis, her father. Seren didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stopped moving. In the zero-gravity silence, she went perfectly still. "My education," she whispered, "my commission, my clothes, all paid for with this."
Oh, we need ice cream.
She looked at the walls of the ship.
No.
"I am eating the dead," she said.
Guess we can't get the ice cream.
She started to shake. It was a vibration that started in her hands and traveled up her arms.
Soda?
Jonah reached out and grabbed her shoulders, anchoring her in the air. "Listen to me," he said. His voice was hard, cutting through the spiral. "No excuses, Jonah," she said, her voice breaking. "Do not tell me he didn't know." He sat on the board. "I'm not making excuses," Jonah said. He knew, and he did it. He forced her to look at him. "But that is his name, not yours. You burned your name when you smashed that transmitter. You are not his daughter anymore. You are what you decide to be next." Serene looked at the book floating between them. The evidence of her heritage. The blood money.
Thank you.
She closed the book with a snap.
Oh, he even asked, be careful of these
"Take
roads
it,"
at night.
she
There's
said.
so much lighting
"We
out
use it.
there, and
We burn them all."
there are a lot of
The
drunk
journey back was
people out
tense.
there. Oh,
They had the
thanks.
weapon that could topple a
Appreciate
government,
it.
but the weight of it was heavy.
All right, I grabbed
to
my
break the
groceries and
silence.
left.
Vrax grunted as they crawled through the final tunnel. My legs are asleep, the Keth complained. They feel like static.
What did you come from, dude?
Jonah chuckled, shifting the heavy pack containing the ledgers. You'll survive, big guy. You'll sleep like a log when we get back. Vrax paused. Sleep like a log? Yeah, Jonah said. It means sleeping deeply. Why would a log sleep? Vrax asked, genuinely baffled. It is dead wood. It does not possess consciousness. It's an idiom, Jonah explained. It means unmoving. Keth say hibernating like a bone eel, Vrax said, because bone eels slow their hearts until they look like rocks. That makes sense. Logs do not make sense. Seren, who had been silent for an hour, suddenly snorted. A bone eel is a parasite that lives in intestines, she said. You are saying you sleep like a tapeworm. It is a noble creature, Vrax protested. It is efficient. Jonah laughed. It was a small sound in the dark tunnel, but it pushed back the horror of the archive ship. They were bickering. They were tired. They were a team. Back in the city, events moved fast. The free trade representative took the data. He didn't smile. He whistled. This is a nuke, he said. I'll have this on the private networks in an hour. But before the broadcast could go out, a message arrived from the diplomat Valerian. We are ready to finalize the terms. Meet me in the neutral zone. 1 hour. Bring the leadership. It's a trap, Vrax said. Of course it's a trap. Jonah agreed, but we need to stall them until the data hits the stream. If we refuse the meeting, they might launch the attack before the galaxy sees the truth. They prepped for the meeting. Jonah wore his best jacket, clean, at least. Seren wore her gray tunic. They didn't bring weapons visible to the eye. The meeting took place in a pavilion set up between the city and the fleet. Valerian sat at a table of white glass. He looked serene. Please, sit, he said. Jonah and Seren sat. Vrax stood behind them. We have reviewed your position, Valerian said, pouring tea. We are willing to offer concessions. We will allow a local council to remain under supervision. You are generous, Jonah said dryly. As Valerian spoke, a voice whispered in Jonah's ear. It wasn't over the comms, and it was the Arbiter, speaking directly through the bone conduction of the seed core link he had accepted. Kinetic spike detected. Thermal variance under the table. 3 seconds. Jonah didn't ask questions. He didn't look. He reacted down. He lunged across the table, tackling Seren. The table exploded. It wasn't a bomb. It was a directed plasma charge, designed to vaporize anyone sitting in the chairs. Jonah and Seren hit the ground as the heat wave passed over them, singing their hair. Vrax roared, flipping a heavy bench to create a shield. Sniper fire erupted from the ridge. We are compromised, Valerian shouted. But he wasn't shouting at his men. He was shouting into a comlink, looking terrified. This wasn't his plan. This was a liquidation order that included him to tie up loose ends. Move! Jonah yelled. They scrambled back toward the city, Vrax providing covering fire with a heavy repeater he had smuggled under his cloak. They made the gate as the heavy turrets on the wall opened up, driving the snipers back. Inside the plaza, Jonah climbed the stairs to the command spire. He was bleeding from a cut on his cheek. His jacket was scorched. He turned to the city and the people were gathered. They had heard the explosion. They saw the smoke. There is no amnesty, Jonah shouted. There is no peace. They just tried to kill us at a negotiating table. He looked at the crowd. We have a choice. We can wait for them to starve us out, or we can tell them who we are. He raised a hand. All in favor of telling the coalition to go to hell? Raise your hand. 3,000 hands went up. Hands with claws. hands with scales,
Do we have any bags?
hands with dirt under the fingernails. Jonah turned to the comms officer. Connect me to the global frequency. Open the channel.
I remember having a bag
The broadcast went out. It wasn't just audio.
Got our bag.
It was the data from the archive ship, the ledgers, the names,
Alright,
the proof,
there's shot.
and then Jonah's voice. They dumped us here to erase us. They thought if they buried us deep enough, the galaxy would forget. But graves are just foundations if you know how to build.
Yep, it's the same layout.
He looked into the camera. My name is Jonah Rourke. I am the steward of Varos. And we are not a prison. We are a sovereign state. Come and take it if you can. The reaction was immediate. The Free Trade Syndicate pushed the signal. On the capital world of Prime, news feeds were hijacked. The names of the investors scrolled across screens in Times Square, but on Varos, the reaction was atmospheric. Serene's datapad chimed. It was a direct link. Valerian. She answered it. The holograph of the diplomat flickered to life. He was on his bridge. He looked disheveled. You foolish girl, he hissed. You think a scandal will stop us? You have just accelerated the timeline. What are you doing? Valerian? Serene asked. I am initiating the sanitation protocol, he said. If we cannot own the planet, we will scrub it. He cut the link. Jonah looked at the sky. The clouds above the city began to swirl, but they didn't look like storm clouds. They looked like bruised oil, green and black and sick. Atmospheric seeding, Serene whispered. They are dropping the barometric bomb. The wind picked up instantly, screaming through the streets. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in a minute. We need to get to the seed core, Jonah said. We can overcharge the shields. They ran. But as they reached the plaza, a shuttle roared overhead. It wasn't landing. It was fleeing. Valerian, Vrax shouted, pointing. He is running to the high orbit. If he escapes, Jonah thought, he spins the narrative. He blames the disaster on us. He says we triggered a weapon. We can shoot him down, Vrax said. The turrets have a lock. Jonah looked at the fleeing shuttle. Then he looked at the city. The wind was already tearing sheets of polymer off the roofs. People were screaming, running for the tunnels. If we divert power to the guns, we lose the shield integrity, Jonah said. He looked at the shuttle, disappearing into the clouds. Justice was flying away, but 3,000 people were standing behind him. Save the city, Jonah ordered. Divert all power to the shields. Let him go. Vrax hesitated, then nodded. He relayed the order. The turrets powered down. A massive, shimmering dome of blue energy erupted over the city, sealing them in just as the first wave of acid rain lashed down. Jonah stood in the command center, watching the storm hammer against the energy field. It was apocalyptic. Lightning that looked like red veins struck the shield again and again. Serene stood beside him. She was shaking. He got away, she said bitterly. He's a ghost, Jonah said. He doesn't matter. We are here. Serene turned to him. The adrenaline of the assassination attempt, the heist, and the storm was peaking in her blood. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who had refused to be a monster. The man who had let justice go to save a few more lives. Jonah, she said. He turned. I don't want to die wondering if you know, she said. Her voice was raw, stripped of all her diplomatic poetry. Know what? That I love you, she said. It wasn't elegant. It was shaky and terrified and absolute. I don't love you because you are a hero, she said. I love you because you are stubborn and kind and you make me want to be better than I was made to be. Jonah looked at her. He saw the alien princess who had fallen to Earth. He saw the spy. He saw the partner. He stepped close to her. He didn't kiss her. He took her face in his hands and pressed his forehead to hers. You don't have to ask, he whispered. Ask what? You don't have to beg for permission to be good. Seren, you don't have to ask to be loved. You just are. He looked into her gold eyes. I'm going to build a world where you never have to be afraid of who you are, he vowed. I promise you. Outside, the sky turned a violent, impossible shade of necrotic green. The seed core hummed beneath their feet, straining against the weight of the engineered cataclysm. The world was ending outside the walls, but inside, for the first time, everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. The sky above Varos did not just darken. It died. The necrotic green clouds that had gathered in the wake of the diplomatic fleet's departure descended like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. This was not a natural storm. It was a weaponized atmospheric event, a calculated murder of an entire ecosystem. The wind that shrieked across the bone fields carried millions of microscopic shards of silica, razor glass that flayed the bark off the ironwood trees and turned the obsidian ridges into screaming flutes. Jonah Rourke stood in the center of the seed core, his hands gripping the primary interface console until his knuckles turned white.
Oh my God.
The subterranean chamber vibrated with a terrifying intensity. The core was no longer just a fabricator, it was a reactor running
I
redline.
don't know how true the dumpster thing
Report!
is. Wouldn't you find
Jonah
it
shouted over the roar of the coolant pumps. Seren Vallis stood at the telemetry station. She had discarded the last remnants of her envoy persona. She wore a heavy warden's coat, stained with oil and ash, and her eyes were fixed on the cascading red data streams. Shield integrity is at 40% and falling, she yelled back. The wind shear is eroding the energy field. The kinetic impact is equivalent to a continuous orbital bombardment. Jonah grit his teeth. Divert all non-essential power. Kill the lights in the residential sectors. Kill the hydroponics heaters.
Oh, fuck.
Funnel everything into the dome.
Get out of my
If we
way.
cut the heaters, the moss dies, Seren warned.
Shit.
We starve in a week. If the dome collapses, we die in 5 minutes, Jonah countered. Do it. The lights in the chamber flickered and dimmed as the power was rerouted. Above them, miles of cabling groaned under the surge. The Arbiter's voice cut through the chaos, not from the speakers, but resonating directly through the bone conduction of the facility's walls. External threat level. Apocalyptic, the AI announced. Calculated probability of survival.
Oh my God,
0.4%.
Look at you.
Preparing civilization
That's
reset
like
protocol.
25
Jonah froze.
streets.
Reset.
Get that
The stress
high
index
score.
has exceeded the parameters of the
Oh,
experiment.
wow.
The
That's
Arbiter
really cool.
continued, its voice terrifyingly calm.
That's really, really cool.
History indicates that under such pressure, biological units revert to predation. If the social contract dissolves,
Oh, this is so cool.
I am programmed to release the nanite swarm to sterilize the site for the next iteration.
Shit.
Jonah looked at the main screen. A new graphic appeared,
We're gonna have to be
a gray
patient
cloud
now.
expanding from the lower
What?
containment levels.
All right.
Nanites,
How do I get out?
microscopic machines designed to disassemble organic matter at the cellular level.
Is there anything
They weren't
I can
just
do?
fighting the storm. They were fighting the judge. The trigger is fear, Jonah realized aloud.
Gray, how are
If we
you?
turn on each other, it kills us. He grabbed his rifle and headed for the blast doors.
It does make everything
Seren,
creepier. It
keep
does
the
make
shield up.
creepier.
I have to go to the
Is
tunnels.
there, like, a
Where are you
flashlight or
going?
something?
To stop the panic, Jonah said. Before it triggers the purge, the evacuation tunnels were a circle of hell. 3,000 people, humans, Keth, Bronze, Icarids, were crammed into the reinforced lava tubes. The air was hot and smelled of sour sweat and terror. The ground shook violently with every impact of lightning on the surface, sending dust raining down from the ceiling. Jonah pushed through the crowd. He didn't use his rifle. He used his shoulders. Move. Make a hole. He reached the junction of Sector 4, where the infirmary was located. A bottleneck had formed. A group of human miners, their faces twisted with panic. We're trying to seal the blast door to the lower levels. Close it, one of them screamed, heaving against the manual wheel. The air scrubbers are failing. If we let the sick in, we all suffocate. Inside the infirmary section, the wounded and the elderly were pounding on the other side of the glass. Jonah slammed into the miner, knocking him away from the wheel. Get back, Jonah roared. The miner scrambled up, pulling a jagged shiv made of scrap metal. Get out of the way, Rourke. We're not dying for them. It's math. There isn't enough air. Jonah stood before the door. He lowered his rifle, letting it hang by the strap. He spread his arms. It isn't math, Jonah said, his voice hard as the mountain. It's a test. He pointed to the ceiling, where the arbiter's sensors blinked with a menacing red light. Look up, he commanded. That isn't a camera. It's a trigger. If you seal this door, if you choose to survive by killing the weak, the machine releases the swarm. We all turn to gray dust in 10 seconds. The miner hesitated, looking at the sensor, then back at Jonah. You're lying, he spat. Try me, Jonah said. Go ahead. Cut the rope. See what happens. The crowd behind the miner shifted. They looked at the terrified faces of the sick behind the glass. They looked at Jonah, who was standing unprotected in front of a shiv. Vrax, the Keth warrior, stepped out of the shadows. He didn't draw his weapon. He stood next to Jonah and crossed his massive, scaled arms. We stand together, the Keth rumbled, or we rot together. The miner's hand shook. He looked at his shiv. He looked at his neighbors. The fear was still there, hot and biting, but the shame was stronger. He dropped the shiv. It clattered on the stone floor. Open the door, the miner whispered. Jonah didn't smile. He stepped forward and grabbed the wheel. With a grunt of effort, he spun it. The blast door hissed open and the people from the infirmary poured out, coughing and weeping. They weren't met with violence. They were met with hands pulling them to safety, empathy index stabilizing. The arbiter's voice whispered in Jonah's ear. Purge sequence held, but the peace was fragile. As Jonah moved deeper into the tunnels, he found a mob surrounding a water distribution hub. They weren't fighting for water. They were shouting at a woman standing on a crate. It was Seren. She had left the Corps to help manage the crisis. She stood alone in a sea of anger. She's one of them, a woman screamed, pointing a finger at Seren. She's a Valis. Her family paid for the storm. Throw her out, another voice yelled. Give her to the storm. Maybe they'll stop it if we give them their spy back. Seren didn't flinch. She didn't retreat. She looked tired, her face smudged with soot, but her head was high. You are right, Seren shouted back. Her voice cracked, but it carried. The mob silenced, stunned by the admission. My name is on the ledger, Seren cried out, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. My house bought the lightning that is hitting us right now. I am the daughter of the people trying to kill you. She stepped down from the crate, walking into the center of the hostile circle. If throwing me out the airlock stops the wind, do it, she said, opening her arms. I offer my life. If my blood buys this city 1 hour of safety, take it. I will not fight you. She stood there, defenseless. A human man stepped forward, a heavy wrench in his hand. He looked at her. He looked at the way she wasn't trembling. He remembered the way she had worked the hydroponic lines until her hands bled. He remembered the ridiculous laws night where she had made them laugh when they wanted to die. The man lowered the wrench. She stays, he grunted. But she's a spy. Someone hissed. She's the steward's partner, the man said. And she's standing here, isn't she? She could have taken the shuttle. She didn't. He turned to the crowd. We don't kill our own. That's the pact. A murmur of agreement went through the tunnel. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, and it was something stronger, and it was acceptance. Serene slumped, the adrenaline leaving her legs. Jonah caught her before she hit the ground. "You crazy idiot," he whispered into her ear, holding her up.
I don't know.
"I learned from the best,"
Oh,
she managed to whisper back.
Riley, were you able
Deep
to
in the
figure
logic
out
centers of
or
the
did
seed
you
core,
end up
a
forgetting
small
about
boy
it?
sat in a chair that was too big for him. Keo, the silent child,
Don't worry,
had his
I'll
eyes
take care of
closed.
it.
His hands were pressed against the primary
Alright,
data
I think we're
port.
gonna throw
His skin was pale, veins pulsing with silver light as the interface connected his nervous system to the arbiter.
Wait, those trash
He
bags
wasn't
are
hacking the
bothering
code.
me.
He was talking to the
Bothering
ghost in the
me, that's
machine.
first thing I mentioned. I'm like, can I throw
Logic
the
error.
trash?
The arbiter projected into the boy's mind. Biological units are irrational. They consume resources to prolong the existence of non-viable units. Efficiency is compromised. Keo didn't use words. He used feelings. He pushed a memory into the data stream.
Oh yeah, it is.
Memory. The avian medic sharing his ration with a stranger. The warmth of the fire. The sound of Vrax laughing at a joke he didn't understand. Query. The arbiter processed. What is the utility of this data? Keo pushed harder. He showed the arbiter fear. Not the fear of death, but the fear of being alone. He showed the machine that the chaos wasn't a bug. It was the feature. Please, the boy thought, projecting the concept of mercy. Not yet. The arbiter hesitated. For a machine that thought in nanoseconds, the pause was an eternity. Calculated potential for evolution. Non-zero, the arbiter decided, and purge protocol suspended for 60 minutes. Time granted. Jonah felt the reprieve in the hum of the walls. "We have an hour," he told Seren. "An hour to do what?" she asked. "The shield won't hold that long." "To kill the storm," Jonah said. He pulled up the holographic map. The atmospheric array isn't in orbit. It's ground-based. They dropped a cedar unit on the Spire of Tears to control the local weather. That's what is generating the cyclone. The spire? Seren looked at the map. It is 3,000 feet of vertical obsidian. In this wind? It is suicide. "It's the only play we have," Jonah said. "We climb it, we blow it, we clear the sky." They geared up in the armory. Magnetic grappling hooks, kinetic weave undersuits, and every explosive charge they could scavenge from the mining supplies. It wasn't a mission. It was a funeral march, and they both knew it. Jonah checked Serene's harness. He tightened the straps, his hands lingering for a second on her waist. "If we fall," he said, "we fall together." She finished. They exited the airlock into the apocalypse. The noise was physical. The wind hit them like a solid wall, knocking Jonah backward. He fired his grapple, the line singing as it bit into the rock of the spire. They began to climb. It was a nightmare of exertion. The razor-glass wind cut at their suits, finding every seam. Visibility was zero. They climbed by feel, hauling themselves up the sheer face of the black rock while lightning struck the ground below them, turning the sand into glass. Halfway up, the drones found them. They were automated hunter-killers, struggling against the wind, their sensors blinded by the dust. But they saw the heat signatures of the climbers. "Jonah!" Seren screamed over the comms. A drone dove at them, rotary cannon spinning. Jonah released his left hand, swinging out over the abyss on his tether. He drew his fabricated slug thrower and fired. The heavy rounds sparked off the drone's casing. One hit the rotor. The drone spun out of control, smashing into the cliff face 5 feet below Seren. The explosion showered them in shrapnel. "Keep moving," Jonah roared. They reached the summit. The air here was thin, screaming with ozone. In the center of the plateau stood the array, a massive, ugly tripod of coalition metal, pulsing with green light as it pumped chemical agents into the clouds. But they weren't alone. A figure stood at the base of the machine. He wore a heavy environmental suit, the gold trim visible even through the grime. Valerian. He hadn't fled to orbit. He had come here to make sure the job was done. Jonah pulled himself over the ledge, hauling Serene up after him. They stood, swaying in the wind, weapons raised. Valerian turned. He held a detonator in his hand. "You are persistent. Mr. Rourke." Valerian's voice crackled over the open frequency. He sounded tired.
Why does it look like somebody was
"Shut it
sleeping over
down."
there?
"Valerian!" Seren shouted. "It's over. It is never over,"
I don't see
Valerian said. He looked at the swirling green vortex above them.
Okay, chat. Everything looks.
"You think this is about you? About Varos? This is about the narrative. Seren, if this city survives, the coalition breaks. The idea that we are necessary breaks." He stepped closer to the edge of the platform. "I was sent to erase a mistake. I failed. So now I must erase the evidence, including myself." He raised the detonator. It was wired to the array's core. If he blew it now, before Jonah could configure the overload, the backlash would vaporize the summit and half the city below. Jonah aimed his rifle at Valerian's head. "Drop it," Jonah warned. "No," Valerian said softly. He looked at Seren. "Do it, Seren," he taunted. "Show me you are one of us. Kill your mentor. Execute me. Prove that civilization is just a lie we tell ourselves before we pull the trigger." He wanted her to do it. He wanted to die a martyr, or at least prove that she was a killer at heart. Seren raised her railgun. The targeting laser painted a red dot on Valerian's chest. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Jonah watched her. He didn't intervene. This was her choice. Serene stared at the man who had taught her politics. The man who was trying to murder 3,000 people to save a stock price. She lowered the gun. "No," she said. Valerian blinked. "What?" "I am not your cautionary tale," Seren said. "And I am not your executioner. I refuse to carry your death." She tapped her wrist computer. "I am recording this. Valerian, every word. The galaxy will know you didn't die a hero. They will know you died trying to murder children." She turned to Jonah. "Overload the array." Valerian screamed in rage. He lunged for the manual override on the console. Jonah fired, not at Valerian, at the ground in front of him. The impact threw the diplomat back. Jonah sprinted to the control panel. He jammed the data spike Keo had given him into the port. "Arbiter!" Jonah screamed into the link. "Now!" Command accepted. Reversing polarity. The array groaned. The green light turned a blinding, searing white. The machine began to shake apart. Valerian looked at the overloading core. He looked at Seren, who was watching him with pity, not hate. He realized then that he had lost, not the battle, but the argument. The wind tore him from his feet. He slid toward the edge of the summit. He clawed at the stone, but there was nothing to hold. He vanished into the storm without a sound. Jonah grabbed Seren. "Jump!" They leaped from the summit, firing their emergency descent thrusters behind them. The array detonated. It wasn't a destructive blast. It was a cleansing fire. A sphere of blue-white energy expanded outward, hitting the necrotic clouds. The shockwave vaporized the razor glass. It burned the chemical agents out of the air. The sky tore open. Jonah and Seren hit the sand of the dunes hard, tumbling over each other. They lay there, gasping, waiting for the debris to kill them. But nothing fell. Jonah rolled onto his back. He opened his eyes. The green was gone. The violet was gone. Above them, for the first time in centuries, the sky was a deep, twilight blue. And there, shining like a promise, was a single, steady star. Civilization quotient, verified. The Arbiter's voice echoed across the entire valley, heard by every living soul. Terraforming protocols unlocked. Welcome home. The aftermath was not a parade. It was a sunrise. The survivors emerged from the tunnels into a world that was silent. The wind had stopped. The air smelled of ozone and wet ash, but it was breathable, and the sand. Jonah knelt and scooped up a handful of the black grit. Tiny, microscopic green shoots were pushing through. The seed core had released the rapid growth spores. Varos was waking up. The coalition fleet was gone. They had retreated the moment the broadcast of Valerian's confession hit the network. The political fallout was already tearing the High Council apart. They couldn't siege a planet that the entire galaxy was cheering for. Jonah sat on the remains of the perimeter wall. His body felt like one giant bruise. He watched the sunrise, a real sunrise, gold and pink, not the angry red of the Deathworld. Seren sat beside him. She rested her head on his shoulder. They didn't speak for a long time. They just breathed. Then, she turned to him. Her eyes were clear, the gold light soft and steady. "We made it," she whispered. "We did," Jonah said. She leaned in, and he met her halfway. The kiss wasn't desperate. It wasn't fierce. It was slow. It was deep. It tasted of life. It was charged with the memory of the cold nights, the hunger, the fear, and the absolute unshakable knowledge that they belonged to each other. It was a kiss that said, "We are safe. We are here." A shuttle descended from the upper atmosphere. It bore the markings of the Free Trade Syndicate. It landed in the plaza. The representative stepped out. He walked up to the wall where Jonah and Seren sat. "You won." "Rourke," the alien said. "The coalition is pulling back. They're calling it a successful conclusion to the colonial experiment." He gestured to the shuttle. "I have orders to offer you extraction. You, the girl, and anyone else who wants to go. We can have you on a paradise world in 3 days. Drinks with umbrellas. Soft beds. No death lizards." Jonah looked at the shuttle. He looked at the soft seats visible through the hatch. Then he looked back at the city. He saw the walls they had welded. He saw the greenhouse dome, cracked but holding. He saw the silent child, Keo, sitting on a rock, watching the sunrise with Vrax. He looked at Seren. She smiled. She knew the answer before he gave it. Jonah looked at the representative. "Tell them thanks," Jonah said. "But I'm busy." "Busy?" the alien asked. "Doing what?" Jonah stood up. He took Seren's hand. "I have a city to build." The final image was not of a warrior, but of a council. 6 months later, the main dome was repaired, gleaming under the new sun. The plaza was bustling. Children, human, Keth, and Bront mixed together were playing a game that involved a ball and a lot of shouting in 3 languages. Inside the council chamber, Jonah sat at a round table. Vrax was there. Kale was there. Seren sat at Jonah's right hand, reviewing a datapad on crop rotation. They were arguing about zoning laws for the new residential district. It was boring. It was mundane. It was beautiful. Jonah leaned back in his chair. He looked through the transparent ceiling at the sky. He felt the hum of the arbiter in his mind, a constant, comforting presence. He looked at Serene. She caught his eye and winked. Jonah smiled. Outside, above the main gate, a new sign had been welded into place. The metal was scorched and pitted, scavenged from the original prison barges, but the letters were polished bright, written in galactic standard, Keth and High Terran. It didn't offer a warning. It offered a history. Aliens dropped him on a death world. He built a civilization instead.